They moved me down to do some color commentating. And after carrying Tony Schiavone for so many years, I got plain tired of it. And then you know what, brother? Easy Bischoff, easy. A man of vision, a man of one hell of a vision. And the New World Order became the sounding board for wrestling as we know it.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Well, the first thing you gotta realize, brother, is this right here is the future of wrestling. You can call this the New World Order of Wrestling, brother. The New World. Everybody was wondering who the third man was. New World. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you people wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff would be still selling meat from a truck in Minneapolis.
Grab your plunder and open the pay window. It's time for Survey Says.
World Order of Wrestling, brother.
Welcome, everyone, to another fine edition of Survey Says here on the Place to Be Nation. We've reached a milestone, actually, as this is our 12th episode, and we've now had more total number of episodes than there are Super Brawl pay-per-views. It's also a great day today here on Survey Says because it's Ralphus Day, and every day is Ralphus Day. My name is Lonely Vincent Andy Savage, and I'm here with my co-host, Big Sexy Tim Capel. Tim, how you doing tonight?
Andy Savage, awesome to be with you here on Ralphus Day. It almost slipped my mind that it was Ralphus Day, but how can we? We have so many opportunities to celebrate it, so very excited.
For our 12th episode, we're going to be talking about that group, the influential group in pro wrestling, the New World Order.
Yeah, some might say it's a rather dark Ralphus Day, but that's all right. We'll get through it. This is actually a topic I was really looking forward to, and glad that the fate smiled upon it. So, let's get into it.
Before we do, we got to bring in our third member of the crew tonight. He's actually a return guest, so it's also another milestone because he was a guest, our first ever special guest on the show. Now he's come back to be like a two-time guest, and it is none other than Buff Daddy Greg Phillips.
Well, you've seen the medium-sized guy, dude, and you've seen the big man. Well, now it's time for the third man, brother.
Thank you for having me on, Andy. I very much appreciate it.
2 times. Really historic occasion here. Wow. I mean, the 3-man power trip. This is almost too perfect and too sweet.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
That's a pretty good too sweet.
I missed having you on, Greg, and all your impersonations.
Well, I don't know if I've talked to you about this, Andy. This may have just been a me and Tim off the air kind of thing, but over the course of the last I don't know, I'm gonna say 15 years or so, but probably more realistic the last 5 years. I've really honed in on the secret to a truly great Hulk Hogan impression. Not that I'm saying I even have one, but I found the secret to getting there. And the getting there is in that very first syllable. The very first thing you do, because Hulk Hogan has a way, especially once you reach the 90s and beyond, of beginning every promo with this noise. And if you can master the noise, I'm convinced you can get your way to a great Hogan impersonation, because it's not it's not or even it's
right.
And it's you'll go back and watch Hogan promos, and I promise you, more often than not, you'll find it.
It's true. Every now and then he'll do the, well, you know something, brother, but he enunciates that pretty clearly. It's when he doesn't do that you just sort of get the abbreviated, I don't know what you call it, just a guttural sort of
the guttural noise. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, because it depends on if he's trying to be deliberate with his message, he'll start with the, well, you've got the, but if he really wants to, if he's sweating or if he's already intense, or if he's in the middle of a speech with Bischoff, Easy E and me were riding our Harley down the beach, dude.
Oh, man.
He always made the motorcycle noise. Why would
This is absolutely true. I've in my preparations for this episode, I have gone back and watched a lot of those long nWo diatribes where it's like 100 guys in the ring, and it's Bischoff and Hogan just stroking their egos, and they all went like that. They really did. So you're not wrong at all. Amazing.
To his credit, Hogan really knew how to mimic the sound of a motorcycle. It was pretty accurate.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I saw a bunch of those promos too, because since we had chosen the nWo as the topic through that drawing, I've had plenty of time to do prep work because now the network's added Thunder. So I've went through, I think Tim has too, watching a bunch of that.
Oh, glory be, the network has added Thunder. That is just, it's my most anticipated drop. I'm not going to lie. And granted, it's not the entire series, but I wasn't asking for that necessarily. I wasn't expecting it. I think that's an unrealistic demand, but I am sitting pretty with what we got. It's made my chronological rewatch of 1998 WCW possible. And I am in hog heaven, kind of at Sturgis in a way.
Perhaps even road heaven.
Right? Yeah, no doubt. Wild heaven.
Speaking of those Thunder promos and stuff, you had mentioned one to me, Tim, where Hogan reverts back to the Hulkster.
Yes, Hollywood does sort of the nWo black and white version of the really spaced out Hulkamania promo from back in the Federation days. He talks about going down to the beach with a palm tree in one hand and a hippie in the other, dragging his Harley into the ocean, pleading to the great nWoite in the sky, why does J.J. Dillon have to lie?
I actually got that audio from that, and I got audio from another one I thought was kind of funny. So I can.
Oh boy.
Well, I was in Venice Beach yesterday, and I stuck my Harley Davidson in the ocean, brother, with a palm tree and a hippie in each hand. I looked at the big nWoite in the sky, and I said, why does J.J. Dillon have to lie?
I got it.
What does that even mean? A palm tree and a hippie in each hand?
I don't know. I couldn't parse it.
When we hit the Windy City last night, brah, the people thought it was a 747 coming in for a crash landing in O'Hare. But the bottom line, we had a little mechanical failure, so I just punched out some holes in the first class cabin, and I used the pythons for a set of wings on the 747, so don't panic.
I can hear him
not a
lining up.
natural disaster.
Traps down.
It was just the shadow of the pythons coming over O'Hare.
What?
How can anyone not love it? Like,
I know.
How can you hear that and not just love pro wrestling?
Hollywood Hogan was the man.
He was the man, without question. Without question. He just converted me to puberty when I was saying that just now because of how awesome he was. He was the man.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, I think that sets the stage nicely because we're going to be talking plenty of NWO Hollywood tonight, because our topic is the New World Order of professional wrestling, baby. And I guess, it all started 1996. Scott Hall makes his debut on Nitro, somewhat uninvited, interrupting a match between Steve Dahl and the Mauler. Oh my God! The Mauler is out of control. Well,
he hit the ball.
Here's Scott Hall. What's going on here? Wait, with the Mauler? No. As much as Larry Zbyszko wanted to keep the action focused on what was going on in the ring, Scott Hall in his Canadian tuxedo interrupts the proceedings, and that's the shot heard around the world. Greg, I think you already gave us your pro wrestling and WCW origin story when you joined us in your first episode. That was, gosh, Andy, was that episode 3 for us? Was it that early on?
Yep, it was.
All right. So we can probably dispense with that background. What I want to know, Greg, were you around? Were you watching live when Scott Hall made his WCW debut?
Yes, as best I remember. In fact, you'll have to refresh me on the details of this. What did that happen while Raw was on too?
I mean, they were running head to head, but I can never remember. When they switched times and Nitro went to 2 hours when it started.
Right.
When Raw started. So
the best of my memory is I remember it happening, and I remember watching it and saying something to the effect of, in 12-year-old Greg voice, by God, it's Scott Hall. And or not, no, I didn't say Scott Hall. I said Razor Ramon. I didn't know his name was Scott Hall. I mean, I think I had read that his name was Scott Hall in a wrestling magazine. Because, see, I knew that Scott Hall was coming in to WCW. So that wasn't a surprise because I had read it in, like, The Wrestler or something like that. Or they said it was going to happen. But, but I was surprised when it happened and how it happened. So he came out of the audience. What's that deal all about?
Yeah.
And then my head started turning, and I was like, oh, what if the WWF sent him down? Because he talked about starting a war and everything. So in my little 12-year-old mind, I thought the WWF was actually sending him as a covert agent to WCW, and that maybe he had gone, quote, off script, which I didn't know what that really meant at the time, but I knew that, I knew shit was about to get real, for lack of a better term. Pardon my French. Yeah. But, it was very shocking when I saw it. Like, I was like, nobody come, because you have to remember, in those days, nobody came out of the crowd unless it was Ric Flair in a dress. Nobody, and the way that they handled it, where the announcers were outraged at it and kind of almost trying to ignore it.
Yeah.
And the wrestlers just stopped fighting and just left the ring. It was very unusual, the presentation of it. And then I still remember his promo and Billionaire Ted and Nacho Man and the Huckster. That's really what put it over. I was like, oh, snap. WCW wouldn't let somebody come on the air and make fun of their owner and their product like that. This has to be an actual, some kind of weird thing going on. So, yeah, I definitely remember where I was. I was sitting on my couch in Northport, Florida, watching it on our little humble living room television.
Right. And that would, of course, just intensify when Kevin Nash showed up shortly thereafter, making rather obscure Dennis Miller-esque sports references. Do you remember the first promo that Kevin Nash cut on WCW?
Yes, this was the one where he says, WCW, this is where the big boys play, huh? Listen to the adjective. Play. Is that the same one?
Yes, it's that one. And I believe he says that the show is about as entertaining as listening to Marge Schott do a dramatic reading of Mein Kampf, which I don't even think I want to try to explain that reference. Kids, ask your parents, ask your grandparents. I don't know.
But that is simultaneously the most Kevin Nash line to deliver and yet also like just so absurd. Like just like what percentage of your 1996 or let's be honest 2018 wrestling audience is going to get that reference in the first place?
Yeah, I mean,
like,
it's
and you can just picture the Dennis Miller head bobble going along with it.
Exactly, he was almost doing it. I mean, it's like such a 1996 reference to make, and at the same time one that the audience is largely not going to get. We'll see a lot of that throughout Kevin Nash's, especially WCW and nWo career.
You're about as entertaining as Marge Schott reading excerpts from Mein Kampf, babe.
Absolutely. That gives us the big run-up to Great American Bash, of course. Andy, were you watching the weekly shows during this time and following along with these two interlopers that came in?
I really wasn't, but I remember one of my buddies, we were in like 6th grade, I think then, like I'm heading into the summer after 6th grade, and he was a bigger WCW fan, and I remember we were talking about it the next day.
Can I say also, speaking of the Hall and Nash promos that happened, I distinctly remember that Hall was still doing the Razor voice.
Yeah.
With Chico and Mang and whatnot. And I also distinctly remember, and I think this was brilliant in how they built up, or I don't know if we're going to get there yet or jump straight to Hogan, but like the build up to the third man, they really, that was the most exciting thing to me because I was like running through my head of who it could be. Like I was reading the magazines were speculating on who it would be and whatnot. And I was like running it through my head. But what screwed it up and made me think it was going to be Brett, who was my favorite wrestler, was they kept like Scott Hall. I remember he said, "Yo, you've seen the big man and you've seen the medium-sized man." And it made me think they're going to be a small man.
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there was no small man, in fact.
That's true. He was sort of teasing around that fact, and that's not what it was. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but you're right. He was still doing the whole Razor voice and mannerisms and pretty much that whole character, other than being called Razor Ramon, and they still got served, I believe, with a cease and desist by Jerry McDevitt, I'm sure. Yeah, had to shut that down. And of course, that leads to the interview at Great American Bash, where Bischoff flat out asks them, "Do you work for the WWF?" And they have to say no. And so that was kind of I don't know, it was a cool way to both take the wind out of the sails of any sort of lawsuit that might have been out there, but also just further the storyline and add another layer of intrigue where it's like, okay, well, we've answered that question, so where are they going with this? Of course, then Bischoff gets powerbombed off the stage in a pretty awesome spot. And again, not something you really saw. And that was sort of the first time it was really kind of acknowledged, hey, Eric Bischoff is not just an announcer. He's an executive for this company. So they kind of checked that box along the way. And then, as you said, going into the
one thing about that, though, sorry to backtrack, but on that Great American Bash thing with the powerbomb, I had went back and rewatched that a little bit ago, like a week ago or something, and I kind of liked how even like Luger was coming out for the main event, the next match against the Giant. And I think he even checks on Bischoff too. So it kind of made it seem a little bit more at the time, or at least when I was a kid and I was watching the video, it made it seem more real, or like there might be like, you know, something legit about it.
Well, I mean, in a way, it's an example of a, you know, the work shoot angle that Vince Russo would fall in love with, but it's one that's done much better and done the right way, because it's not saying everything else you see is fake and this is real. It's just, hey, this is reality, and it's just much more intense than everything else you see going on. This is something that is not supposed to happen. Just within the tropes of wrestling, not because everything else is made up and fake and written and scripted and rehearsed, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's the difference, and that's what made this so much more successful and enduring than some of that other crap. But that, of course, does bring us to Bash at the Beach 96, the third man. Greg, you said you thought it was Brett. You thought it was going to be Brett going into the show.
I thought there was a very, very good chance of it. I thought, weirdly enough, my two thoughts, and this is showing you how little knowledge I had of things like contracts and whatnot. My two thoughts were Brett, or I thought Shawn Michaels was a possibility because of his relationship I knew with Razor Ramon. I had read about the Clayton call, so I suspected that perhaps Shawn, if not Brett, then maybe Shawn might be the third man, and that this would lead to some sort of a WCW versus WWF pay-per-view or something. I didn't know. I was having all kinds of crazy fantasy booking going on in my head. But yeah, I was thinking Brett because I knew he had left angry after WrestleMania 12 when he was unjustly robbed of his WWF championship by President Gorilla Monsoon. And so I thought that he was so angry by this. A tie goes to the champion, you see. So yes. I thought he was so upset by this that he would go to the rival promotion and work with Diesel and Razor to sort of take down billionaire Ted's empire.
Wow. Okay. Well, and you bring up Shawn Michaels. He would also fit that little man comment. So that makes sense as well. Andy,
so would Sarge, the trainer of the power plant.
Oh God, Sergeant Craig Pittman,
or Sergeant Craig Pittman.
Yeah. Wait.
I was talking about the state patrol guy. Yes. They called him Sarge. Dwayne Bruce, I think, was his name.
Yes. There you go, Dwayne Bruce.
Oh, the guy that was like with Goldberg later or something.
Yeah,
the guy like the
yeah.
Did he play Buddy Lee Parker?
Yes, Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker.
Yes, yep. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. He was also the leprechaun.
Yeah, he was the leprechaun.
You say the dog is leprechaun, right? Man, that's an underrated contender there for some of the most bizarre gimmicks. We digress. Yeah, imagine him as the third man, wouldn't it? Cutting.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, some guy
cutting the great promo. But I can only imagine, being on the ground floor at the time and just what that speculation would have been. Just think of like all the when they do angles like that. I don't know why, but it just popped in my head at like SummerSlam 92 with Who Sold Out with Savage and Warrior, and just how crazy that was. And to think that if the internet of today existed back then, I don't know, maybe it would have been worse in a way, because just the way people ruin things now. Some Richard, as JR would say,
yes, finds out about it ahead of time and leaks it on Friday.
Then they change it because they want to still surprise people.
It ends up being Matt Hardy, and they feud with each other for like 4 months, and nobody really wants to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the third man, in fact, is Hulk Hogan, making his return after an absence of a few months since the had he been gone since the Doomsday Cage?
Yes, angle? I believe so, as far as I know.
Yeah.
I think they may have done like a shot of him on Nitro from the set of one of his highly successful films he was doing at the time.
And so he's the third man. He struts out to the ring as the heels are gaining the advantage. Lex Luger has been taken out. Normally, that's the tell, right? When a guy goes down and is taken out to the back, and there's going to be a turn, there's going to be a third man, which they've promised. It's like all signs are pointing to Luger, right? And No, they double swerve us with Hulk Hogan, and I don't know. Some people criticize the commentary when you had Bobby Heenan screaming, "Which side is he on?"
And then you had Dusty scream back at him, "The hell you say?"
Yes, absolutely. But I think it adds, again, just sort of that touch of realism that you often didn't get in these big angles. So all in all, I mean whew.
Yeah. Why wouldn't Bobby Heenan as a character question Hulk Hogan? He's been questioning him since the mid '80s, or even farther back. Like, to me, that makes it that made it perfect. Like the fact that Bobby initially questions whose side he's on, and then Dusty immediately shouts him down with "Who be bad now?" and stuff like that. It was just perfect. It was a perfect storm of everything that you could. Looking back, I wouldn't change a single thing about that entire match or segment or whatever you want to call it. Luger was perfect to go to the back because they had done that. Is he a heel or is he a face storyline for like a year at that point?
Right.
And so he was the perfect choice to tease for that. Because I never believed this thing was turning. And then you had Hogan coming in to seemingly save the day, which I'm sure the live crowd probably thought. And you had Bobby questioning it and Tony and Dusty, yelling at Bobby about it because they thought it was just his usual paranoid self. And then the just indignation of the announcers when the big leg is dropped on Savage. It was just a tremendous piece of business. Still to this day, I think the most effective heel turn of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have a hard time arguing against that. And then the promo he cuts, my God, talk about just turning on a dime, just because you had never seen Hulk Hogan talk like that. And that's when he starts doing his raspy Hollywood voice, which I don't know, it seems like that would be hell on your voice. But he was sure committed, and just and the garbage that fills up the ring is just like nothing else.
Look at all this garbage. Hulk Hogan, this garbage represents you.
Kind of had this rattling around in my head. In that promo, how you guys were talking about the work shoot and stuff, I think that this is the best work shoot because I don't know if maybe there was a hint of realism in there or something, or like they planned it, but Hogan is even going off saying something like, when they brought me into WCW, I was wrestling all this, I forget exactly the wordage, but he's like saying it's basically stupid crap that they had him do. And so it almost sounds like maybe they planned to do some stupid shit just so they could do this turn or something. I don't know. It just kind of threw me off.
There's an element of truth there that I think just elevates this so much, because what he's saying, you can see where he's coming from as just the wholesome Hulk Hogan character, and how he would have looked at his career to date in WCW and recognized it as being rather subpar, and turning that against the fans for not supporting him like he felt like they should. And then, of course, you've got, these are the things that Bobby Heenan has been saying all along, his entire career about Hulk Hogan. And now suddenly Bobby Heenan, of all people, Chicken Little, has become the voice of reason. And it's just, you're right. It's just brilliant storytelling. And I mean, really a stroke of genius on Hulk Hogan's part to recognize this and say, I need to reinvent my character. I want to get in on the ground floor because this is going to be big, and this is going to keep the spotlight on me. Let's not set that aside. But I mean, just
and not just to do it, but to embrace it so wholeheartedly, to not do kind of a sort of half-hearted, where he doesn't fully embrace the heel turn, and so it's easier for him to turn back if it doesn't work. He went all in. There's no going back when you tell all the little Hulkamaniacs out there to stick it, brother.
Yes. You don't leave yourself a lot of wiggle room after that kind of a promo that he cut. So, and what a risky move as well, because who knows if this is going to take off. I mean, it could have been his downfall, but
yeah,
he was certainly all in, as you say. So
and it was the perfect time. You know, he had been so. I mean, there's never been a time in Hulk Hogan's career. Maybe 99 would be the other time, but other than 99, there's never been another time in Hogan's career where he's been so cold as a character. Like I remember even as a fan, I was a little Hulkamaniac when I was a kid. By 96, I was done. I had nothing left in me for Hulk or his storylines. Like all the stuff with the Dungeon of Doom had effectively taken away my ability to care at all. And so this was like a breath of fresh air in so many ways. Perfect timing. His promo was outstanding. Even during the midst of the promo, let us not lose sight of the fact that there's this giant fan that runs into the ring and gets the ever-loving crap beaten out of him by Hall and Nash.
Yes. Yeah. Can't let that fall through the cracks of history. Very good stuff.
Oh, let me tell you a brief little story, too, about where I was this night when this happened. I wasn't able to watch the pay-per-views at this time. We were visiting my family members for the summer, and I may have been able to watch the Scramble Vision pay-per-views. I'm pretty sure I could have done that, but on this occasion we were at some kind of family gathering at my aunt's place, and my uncle comes into the living room at some point, or the kitchen or something. He'd come back from his friend's place, and he said he knew I was a big wrestling fan, and he goes, "Hey, did y'all hear?" Now he's got a real thick Southern accent, so he's like, "Did y'all hear that what happened at the bash at the beach? Who the third man was?" And I said, "No, I gotta know who it is." And we were about to leave, and my dad's like, yeah, let's stick around for a minute. He can hear it. So I went in there, and my uncle, my uncle at the time, proceeds to tell me that he's like, okay, what he says is Hulk, but because of his thick Southern accent, what I hear is Hawk.
Oh God!
I'm not kidding you. I spent a night thinking that the third man was Road Warrior Hawk.
And so you're thinking that's it?
That's it. I was so deflated. I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, it was Hawk, man. It was a Hawk. And then I was like, then he starts referring to him as the Hawk, I think.
Oh, no.
And so I was like, that's a really weird way. I've never heard anybody call him that, but whatever, to each their own. So I wake up the next morning and I'm thinking, my God, Hawk is the third man. That's really deflating. I'm not interested in that. Hawk's fine. I liked Hawk, but it didn't make sense. I didn't understand. And then Nitro that night made me understand.
Oh, man. Wow. That is some tonal whiplash. You're going in thinking one thing, and it's still a surprise, even after you think you've been spoiled, as bizarre as that reveal may have been. We've got a lot of strange hypothetical third man possibilities here. So add Hawk to the list. That's crazy. And and the other thing about this whole now nWo angle, the new world organization of professional wrestling, that thankfully didn't last long. It kind of put everybody on notice. It took a lot of the then major heels of the promotion, and if not turned them outright face, then at least made them sort of tweeners. Look at the Horsemen, look at the Giant, and think back to that Disney Nitro, where everybody gets jumped backstage, and it's a match between Sting and was it Luger or Savage and the Horsemen, and then everybody is scrambling backstage, and it's just this panic. And I mean, that again, that is just saying, okay, the wrestling and the storylines we've been doing are one thing. It's not to say that we're throwing them out or that they're unimportant, but in comparison, this is how much bigger the nWo is.
Right. That episode that you're talking about is one of my favorite episodes of any wrestling program ever, like of all time. And I think the reason is, as you outlined, it's not like they abandoned the storylines. It's not like all of a sudden Ric Flair and Arn Anderson are great friends with Sting and Lex Luger. That's not the case. But what it is okay, when we're out here, we're professionals, we're employees of the same company, we have an unspoken brotherhood. When we're out here, we're warriors, we're combatants, we don't like each other, but we're working for the same company. Now we've got these other guys from an outside organization that are trying to come in here and infringe on our territory. It's like when a fan runs in the ring. Mm-hmm. So in this case, there are these people that don't have any business in their world coming in and causing harm, to threatening their livelihoods and their reputations and their company. So they're gonna, that takes precedence over their grudge with their fellow employee.
Yep. And it just puts that much more heat on these outsiders to create this situation where Sting and Ric Flair are cooperating. They're not friends. It's very grudging, like you said, but it really drives that point home. Okay, for Sting and Flair to even be kind of on the same page in the midst of a pretty intense match because of what has just transpired. Wow, this is some serious shit.
Yeah, you had asked me if I had watched the initial Hall and Nash, appearances, and like one thing that kind of hit me now is the earliest memory that I have of all of that is I don't know. I still can't remember if it's a Nitro or a Clash of the Champions. I think there was a triple threat tag team match with like the Steiners, Harlem Heat, and like Sting and Luger, and then like Hall and Nash like jump from the railing and come in, and everybody was just. It was one of those big brawls too.
That was, I think, if it wasn't in the lead up to Great American Bash, it was during the lead up to Bash at the Beach, where they had the bats and they had, I think, police or security at ringside, something along those lines.
Yeah,
and that was a good one too.
It was crazy. Yeah, and Nash has talked about that in a shoot about how from the get-go they were establishing that two dudes with baseball bats held off the entire WCW roster.
Yep, believably.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think he said something like, in all reality, they just could have put Ming in the ring and we couldn't have done anything about it. But, fans didn't know that.
Very good. Well, and of course, you get the great visual of Rey Mysterio getting lawn darted to the side of the trailer.
I mean, think about the level of trust that takes on the part of Rey Mysterio.
Yeah.
To take that bump. I mean, that is like, he literally, and they've said this many times in documentaries and whatnot, but he literally was putting his life in Nash's hands at that point. Because that could have gone horribly bad, and still one of the great bumps in the history of this great sport.
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess the next big moment for this new faction is Hollywood Hogan winning the World Championship at was it still Hog Wild then?
Hog Wild.
Yeah,
that was
Hog
the first
Wild.
Hog Wild. Yep.
That was the first Hog Wild.
And only Hog Wild, actually.
Oh, yeah. The funny thing about that is, like, I did get that videotape of that pay-per-view from, like, Suncoast. Like, one of the few ones I ever saw in a store, but it actually had, like, the Hulkster Hogan on there in his red and yellow.
Good old Turner Home Entertainment. I guess you can thank for that. But who knows how far in advance that was produced before the show itself. But in any case, he defeats the Giant for the World Championship, lays the Giant out, and Giant is down long enough that he could convincingly be dead, but thankfully is not. And who was the next real member to join the nWo? Was it... did they get DiBiase or Vincent?
Oh, let me can I ask you a quick question about Hog Wild?
Yeah.
An answer. I have two, actually. The first one is, did the Giant lay down as long as Booker T did after taking the pedigree at WrestleMania 19, in your estimation?
Much longer, in fact.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
Question number 2. Can you explain to me literally anything that happened after that match in the ring? With regards to, so Hogan beats the Giant and wins the WCW Championship.
Doesn't Brutus Beefcake come out with like a cake?
Yes,
Yeah.
the Booty Man,
Yes.
and didn't, I think the Nasty Boys too, right? Right.
Definitely the Booty Man, and with a cake, yes.
Yes, with a cake, yeah, and it I don't understand any of it. Like, why did it happen?
Well, he was trying to suck up to Hogan, and his overtures were rebuffed. And I think
I don't blame Hogan. I don't blame Hogan. The NWO, the coolest act in the world, and your name is the Booty Man.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it was just one of those things. People probably saw it as, oh, this must be the next member, Ed Leslie. He's, this longtime friend of Hulk Hogan, so he's now joining the NWO, and they were just swerving us on that. Which
at what point did they do the fake Nasty Boys join? Because I feel like weren't they doing an angle where the Nasty Boys were sucking up too?
Halloween Havoc or around the fall or something like that.
Okay,
I kind of vaguely remember that.
That was in the fall. They acted like the Nasty Boys were going to join, and Hall and Nash beat the shit out of them with chairs. And that was the last time you saw Jerry Sags in WCW, as I remember.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Knobs, too. Knobs would come back, regrettably, but Jerry Sags did not.
So to answer your question, I think the next person that we saw with the NWO would have been DiBiase.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, or was it the Giant? I can't remember.
I think
that's
it was
the thing.
DiBiase.
The Giant joined very soon after that match, and so DiBiase is basically the money man behind. He's answering the question of how are they able to do this. There's got to be some kind of benefactor, and that makes, I think, a degree of sense. So that seemed like smart booking.
Mm-hmm.
You get Vincent in there as well as the somewhat useless bodyguard. And can you imagine Vincent joins the NWO, this elite faction, that early in their run? Like, how crazy is that?
It is insane, because I don't think about him being there before 6, but he was.
Yeah.
You had of course DiBiase as the money man. You had the Giant who joined, right, as number 5. And that Vincent,
and that was only like the Giant's probably 4th turn in his then almost not even 2-year career. So
right.
All right, let's break it down. Just quick aside. He comes in as a heel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's feuding with Hogan. He turns face in 96, after kind of during the Dungeon of Doom stuff, I guess, where they're feuding with the Horsemen. I guess he's kind of a face in that equation.
Yeah, because, it's weird. He was almost a tweener, but he was a babyface because, remember, he wrestled Loch Ness.
Yes, we covered that just recently.
And then after he beat Loch Ness, he moved on to Ric Flair, who was a heel at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think he was at least on the way to becoming a face. But then, did he not turn heel immediately thereafter to wrestle Sting and Lex Luger?
Kind of.
I mean, there wasn't a formal turn, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it a turn, but he's definitely very firmly a face when he wrestles Hollywood Hogan.
Right.
And so it's only like a matter.
Didn't he even do a Hulk up in that match?
I believe he did. Yeah. And it's just shortly thereafter he would then defect to the NWO. So we're talking, I guess that's 2 turns within the span of
already, which was setting a stage for a very tumultuous career.
Yes, outstanding.
Well, the actual turn of, I actually remember this turn of the Giant, in fact, because it was a pretty good one, as it turns out. As I recall, the nWo guys are in the ring and doing a beatdown, and here comes the Dungeon of Doom to make the save, right?
Yeah.
On Hall, Nash, and Hogan, and maybe Vincent, I don't remember. And so they all slide into the ring or whatever, and then the Giant turns around and choke slams Ming and Hugh Morris and whoever else was in the ring at the time. And the Giant has defected to the nWo, and then they go, and the announcers are just shocked by this, and then they go up to the announce desk, and Hogan puts on, for one of the first times, the headset at the announce desk and stands there and cuts a promo in the camera, and they're there, and the Giant's there, and I think this is one of the most sensible nWo turns too, because they did a really great job, as I recall. Perhaps I'm wrong, but as I recall, they did a great job of explaining why the Giant would have turned. That basically Hogan got in his ear, and it was kind of the if you can't beat him, join him thing. But Hogan got in his ear and basically let him know about all these Hollywood offers he could get him. He could get him movie roles and get him money and cars and women and all this stuff. And so it made sense that the Giant, being as young and impressionable as he was, would fall for that all that would be appealing to him. And so he realizes, why the hell am I hanging out with this dork Kevin Sullivan when I could be cruising with the nWo?
Absolutely. No, that does put quite a nice spin on it. And I just figure this is a young guy. He's got a bright future ahead of him. Yeah, he's gonna hitch his wagon to the money train. So I kind of like it. And I mean, it's around this time. We're in the fall, so you're getting the Sting teases where they're saying that Sting has now joined them as well. They do the War Games match, of course, where it's the nWo, including Sting, as they say, versus the WCW contingent, which also includes Sting. There's the great beatdown in the rain where Lex Luger is running outside the arena, confronting Sting, gets beaten with the bat. It's the imposter. So sowing the seeds of doubt. I always really enjoyed that segment.
Yes, I was heartbroken. Actually, I was devastated when that happened, because I was like, man, Sting would never turn his back on WCW, and now here he is, and he's joining the nWo. Even though I liked the nWo, I didn't want Sting to join the nWo, and so I was like really bummed out. Because I was convinced it was Sting. We didn't have the ability in those days to like instantly rewind and watch it over again. Because I think I was taping Raw and watching Nitro Live at that time. And so when it happened, I remember my cousin called me, and he was he may have been in tears actually. My little cousin, he was like I was 12, so my little cousin, he would have been 8 at the time.
Oh no!
And he called our house to talk to me about it, and he was just devastated. And he's like, "Why did Sting do that?" And I was like, "Oh well, I mean, I don't know. We have to give it time. We don't know. We don't know why he did it.
We have to give it time."
Yeah, he may have had his reasons. It may have been an optical illusion. We don't know. We don't know what was going on. So it was a big deal for us. Like, we were huge Sting fans, and I was like, oh, there's got to be a reason. And then of course that leads into the War Games match. Yeah,
and come to find out, there are 2 Stings. In fact, this leads to the real Sting proper, cutting that great promo, and he's got his back to the crowd, of course. I think we talked about this on your Sting episode. Leads to his exile. So, again, very smart in terms of the storyline here. The nWo look at it as, if we can't get this guy to join us, then we can at least stir the pot enough and create enough dissension that we can take him out of the equation as a threat for a while, and just capitalizing on all the doubt that's stewing within WCW as an organization. So I thought that was pretty cool. And a lot of these things make more sense in hindsight, as you sort of piecemeal it together. But still, it makes for a good rewatch.
At what point does Hogan take Ric Flair's robe and like a hair piece that makes it look like he has Ric Flair's hair?
Ooh, that was. I feel like that would have had to have been around that Clash in August of, not the last Clash that they did, but the one in '96. That August, because it's a rare example of a face Flair versus heel Hogan match that early on. So it must have been part of that feud.
And perhaps in WCW, the only time maybe that Flair ever beat Hogan, because didn't he win by disqualification or count out or something?
I think he did win by DQ. I need to rewatch that match. It's been
me too. I haven't watched it since it aired. Yeah, it's been since August of '96 or whatever.
Wow. So, Greg, I do have to ask at this point, this whole Sting situation, was this more heartbreaking for you than when Sting was defeated by Vader?
No, not even close.
No,
not even close. No,
it wasn't.
I was decidedly not in tears over this.
You were not in tears.
No, I was devastated. I was disappointed would be a good term for it. Very disappointed in Sting and in the situation in general. But no, it was not the same as seeing the Vader loss was like watching, Superman get his ass kicked for the first time. And you're like, God, because it's like, it's not. You're used to seeing Sting lose. He lost all the time, but he usually lost by chicanery or shenanigans. Somebody has to cheat to beat him, or beat him up before the match. But this was just the guy just beating him. That never happened.
No doubt, yeah. Well, you had to stay strong for your cousin, so I understand. Different circumstances.
I had to be the lighthouse to guide him back to shore.
Did a great job of that.
Because our Stinger pipe had sunk into the ocean at that time. I don't know.
In any case, we have as the 6th member of the nWo, appropriately enough, 6. That's September debuting, and I feel like I read he was supposed to debut sooner, but there's some kind of contracts issue, or maybe he was hurt. Not really sure. So it was slightly delayed. I don't know what they'd call him if he had not been the 6th member of the nWo, and that could be.
He could have been 7, which was the gimmick they tried to give Dustin Rhodes several years later.
Oh boy. The less said about that, the better, of course.
So, help me out with counting the nWo members here. So you got, obviously Hall, Nash, Hogan. Those are your first 3. Yes. Then I think we settled on DiBiase as 4. Is that right?
Yep.
Giant as 5.
Giant, yep. And I don't think Sting counts. So even though there's
don't think Sting counts, even though there's an nWo Sting.
See, they could count nWo Sting, but in that case, DiBiase would not count since he's not a wrestler.
Not an active wrestler. Yes. What about Vincent?
In order to get to 6, you have to fudge it somehow or another, right?
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask what about Vincent too.
Vincent was after 6. I have that a little bit too soon, but I mean it was like maybe the next week or two you got Vincent. So, and I mean that was kind of the nWo for a little bit, oddly enough. I mean, people don't think about that early, the big 3, of course, like you mentioned, everybody knows, and then they think of the giant supergroup, but there's this kind of weird interim period where it's this core group of the heavy hitters, and then these sort of like also-rans.
Think of how in the span of, let's be generous, and let's say in the span of a year and a half, they go from 3 guys in the ring to so many guys in the ring that people have to sit on the turnbuckles because there are so many people in the ring.
Yes. And you can't even see dudes because they're crowding each other out so much.
Yes.
Now you do get Miss Elizabeth joining at
Elizabeth. Yep.
Yeah, around Halloween Havoc with the tremendous and rather uncomfortable promos today of Hollywood Hogan.
You got to tell them about the trailer promo, Tim.
Okay, so I think people this one may have gotten lost to time, but basically Hulk Hogan is on the set of, I believe he was filming Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain.
Yes.
This is the film where he's got the he has a full like toupee basically because he wrestles part of the match with Randy Savage. He's still wearing the toupee,
Yes.
which Savage actually rips off, and that's, I mean, what a vote of confidence for Savage, for Hogan to let him do that. But anyway, he's confronting Miss Elizabeth in his trailer on the set of this film. The Giant has taken over the director's chair. He's kicked the proper director, I don't know who that was, I don't think anyone does, off the set. He's commandeered the camera, and essentially what's going on is that Hogan is trying to manipulate Miss Elizabeth into, I guess, playing psychological mind games with her ex-husband Randy Savage, because he thinks that will make Savage weak and soften him up for their match at Halloween Havoc. And he's just berating Elizabeth, and he's telling her, you're gonna tell Randy that you still love him even though you don't. You're gonna, and she's just pleading with him. She's saying, I think she even says Terry. She says, Terry, Hulk, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that to Randy. You're gonna do it, or I'm gonna make you regret this. You're gonna tell him you love him even though you don't. He's just saying it over and over, screaming it.
Does he realize that the cameras are watching him?
Yes, he's like, I think at this point he's ordering the Giant to film all of this. So, which is weird how it's airing, but in any case, maybe
does he not realize that Randy's going to see it?
Maybe WCW got a hold of this, prematurely.
Well, you also have to figure it's part of, you have to use that retroactive continuity that we comic fans are so fond of, and say that Bischoff was actually arranging for all this and allowing it to take place.
Yes,
right.
And bear in mind, she does turn. It wasn't like he was trying to turn her to the NWO. He was just trying to get her to fuck with Randy Savage. But she ends up outright turning and joining the NWO. So that was a pretty big moment. And she also says, and this was very telling, during this whole sordid exchange, she says, you already ruined my life once, don't do it again. So, which tells me, like, in kayfabe and Miss Elizabeth headcanon, she blames Hulk Hogan for the implosion of the MegaPowers. She probably blames him for the dissolution of her marriage, in fact. Wow, that's a little bit of perhaps revisionist history by WCW here. But yeah, go back and check out that stuff in the lead up to Halloween Havoc 96.
And that's utterly fascinating. That's a fascinating twist on one of the great wrestling stories that Liz now sees through Randy's eyes, that perhaps it was Hogan's fault all along.
Now that he is this dastardly villain. Of course, you get Roddy Piper's WCW debut at the conclusion of that Halloween Havoc match between Hogan and Savage. Savage is rather unceremoniously carted off after losing the match, which I think becomes somewhat important later in his history. But I think the next big moment really...
And in fact, as I've learned in recent years, there was a reason for that, which is that Savage's contract was apparently up. And there was a lot of heavy speculation that he was going to head back to the WWF at that time.
Yeah. I remember hearing that too. It seemed like that just always was this cloud that hung around Savage and his WCW run. It was always like, oh, his contract's up, he's going back to the WWF. Oh, he's going back to, and this was before people talked about the supposed heat between he and Vince.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, people forget that is more of a recent phenomenon. But in any case, you have Savage taken off the board for a little while. Roddy Piper in the picture. He outs Eric Bischoff as the mole, as someone who has been behind the scenes pulling the strings, supporting the New World Order. This was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like
so
that segment on Nitro where he basically points the finger at him, says, "You're the guy. I know what you've been doing." And Bischoff is denying it at first, and then finally he's just like, "You know what? Fuck you." And I don't know.
Slimy Eazy-E is born.
Yeah, the Eazy-E character, who, I mean, I've said it so many times, he beat Vince McMahon to that character in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they are starkly different personalities, playing different characters but similar roles, where they're the, Vince, the evil owner of the company, Bischoff, the evil executive. Not that he is Ted Turner by any means, but he's in charge of WCW. And now he is the highest ranking official, not only in WCW, but the nWo, as he is so keen to point out.
Yeah, his character is almost like if a smarmy David Spade character from the mid-90s gained a lot of power.
I was even going to think of the RoboCop guy. Not the Dick Jones, but the one that was the greater
Bob
RoboCop.
Morton. Yeah.
Bob Morton.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. A great comparison.
Yeah. That is a great comparison. But he's got that David Spade, that just kind of like smarminess about him.
He does.
Like, everything he says has this like layer of like disingenuousness, I guess. But yeah, Bob Morton's an excellent comparison.
Yeah. But and I think
I was gonna say that's my favorite segment actually ever on Nitro.
Is it really?
From a live watch perspective, because I think Nitro was a show more so than I think Raw, especially in those days in particular, that prided itself on the moment, the shock moment. And that to me is one of the greatest swerves ever in wrestling, because I did not remotely see it coming. And I don't think anybody could have seen it coming. I don't see how anyone could possibly have, just from watching the shows, have ever expected that to happen, because so many Nitros ended with just announcements in the middle of the ring, at the end of the show. We'd seen it millions of times. And then here's Piper to interrupt Bischoff. It's like, oh, what the hell's going on here? And then as the promo unfolds, I thought it was brilliant, man. I thought it was one of Piper's last great promos. And I thought it was, the birth, obviously, of a great character in Evil Bischoff. But the whole thing, the way it played out, is the road crooked or straight, It was from a live watch perspective, I don't think I've ever been as riveted by a segment from Nitro as I was by that one.
It's definitely a contender, and that's very awesome to me that it is your favorite from watching at the time, because like I said, this is all just back matter to me, where I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who would have been watching at the time and thinking how big a deal it strikes me as, but not really being able to speak to it from experience myself. So that's awesome. And I feel like that marked it was a sea change, right? Where this is going to be now the second phase of the New World Order. They're no longer these sort of interlopers coming in, or like potentially WWF guys invading. Now they are the power. Like, they've effectively won this war already. Eric Bischoff is in charge, so they can call the shots. And
they've got all the belts.
They've got all the belts. and they were very smart in acknowledging that. Bischoff cuts that great promo where he essentially puts all WCW wrestlers on notice, says that they have, 30 days to convert their WCW contracts to nWo contracts, whatever that means. But and that's when you get like the big recruiting drive, essentially, for, I guess, the early part of 97. And we cannot go through, the history blow by blow, member by member, I feel like from here on out, because it's just so many guys joining, so much going on, and so much of the show just shows, plural, really revolving around this faction and how much bigger they're getting and how they're consolidating their power. I feel like it's a good break point for us. Take a pee, have a pee. Yeah, take a pee, have a pee. Have a what's our official sponsor? Dr. Thunder, Dr. Shasta.
Yeah, or Dr. What was it? Dr. Slice.
Dr. Slice is the one.
Dr. Slice.
There we go.
Well, I think before we go to the break, we can end it on the recruitment of the most memorable NWO member of this period, Michael Wall Street.
Oh,
sorry, VK Wall Street. I'm sorry.
Well, I make that same mistake myself. We get VK Wall Street, formerly of the York Foundation.
I thought
formerly of the Internal Revenue Service.
I thought you would go with your MVP of the New World Order. What did you call him? Like Bartholomew Rogers?
Large Bartholomew Rogers.
Large Bartholomew Rogers.
He was the Lost York Foundation member.
I think Bartholomew gets my vote because he ran over Hugh Morris.
He got a bicycle.
Yep, Big Bubber. So they kind of joined at the same time during this weird. But I think my favorite new member at this juncture was one Marcus Alexander Bagwell.
Bagwell, yes.
Who immediately turns on his fellow American male, Scotty Riggs, who was protesting, telling him not to join, and they kick his ass. So that was a pretty great one, I thought. And finally made you think.
Saved Bagwell's career.
I was going to say, it made you think he would maybe actually amount to something finally. So, yeah, good stuff, no doubt. But in any case, we will revisit this on the other side. Going to go into a break now, so stay tuned for these promotional announcements.
We are in control.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com, and we offer those to you on 3 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the original Place to Be podcast, as well as Main Event, Lucha Afterground, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows, as well as the Our Vantage Point podcast and Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver quick-hit pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Psychology is Dead, Puro Potpourri, Stacy and Elliot's Bogus Journey, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Letters from Center Stage, Space City, and NWA Classics on Demand Adventure, Through the Years, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Kayfabe, and much more. And on our popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, Rank and File, PTBN Dadcast, Go Home in a Box, NBA Team, and Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with the Hard Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversation, Geek and Sassy, and Imaginary Stories podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to all of our feeds on iTunes, and while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when shopping online, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, TheHistoryOfWrestling.com, and Scott Keats' Blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Tired of wearing just the NWO shirt? Well, that's right. There's something to add to your wardrobe collection. Get the sold-out shirt. That's right, fans. Your chance to cash in on the coolest pay-per-view around.
Get your NWO sold-out t-shirt for only $20. Just call 1-800-NWO-0242.
Buy this shirt. Buy this shirt.
The preceding announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
We're back on tonight's edition of Survey Says with myself, Tim, and Greg. We've been talking about the New World Order, but there's a prepared statement that I'd like to say something before we move on further. And guys, hello. How about that ride in? I guess that's why they call it Pity City. You guys might not know this, but I consider myself a bit of a loner. I tend to think of myself as a one-man wolf pack. But when Tim joined the Blog of Doom in 2010, I knew that he was one of my own. And my wolf pack, it grew by one. So there were two of us in the wolf pack. I was alone at first. And then Tim joined in later. And then 28 months ago, when Steve Willie introduced me to the Place to Be Nation, I thought, wait a second. Could it be? And now I know for sure. I just added more bros to my wolf pack. And tonight I can add another. A two-time guest of Survey Says becomes the newest member in my wolf pack.
Oh my, that's tremendous. That is tremendous, Mr. Savage. I very much appreciate that, and I am honored to be a part of the New World Organization Wolfpack, alongside you and Mr. Capel and others, and I just hope that I can do the organization proud.
Oh yes, I'm wiping the tears from my eyes. It's evocative of something. I don't know what, but I feel like maybe I've heard that somewhere before, but no matter. I am so touched to be a part of your wolf pack, and I can promise you, Andy Savage, I'll never hit you in the back with the Place to Be Nation World Podcasting tag team championships, as we will be chronicling soon. That's not me.
And I pledge never to sit in the corner and say that I'm part of the wolf pack, but not really, and kind of stay on the fringe and not decide whether I'm in or out.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. Glad
thank you guys. That is just too sweet. Too sweet of you.
It's just too stinking sweet.
There's also a little bit more business to take care of before we head back in, and that is our fan of the month.
That's right.
We do that every show. So tonight I'm going to induct one of our buddies, another guy in the wolf pack. His name is Brock Everline. He's one guy that's kind of helped, I think, kind of form like the genesis of the show. Because I remember chatting with you guys a lot about WCW, and I was like, there needs to be some kind of podcast about this. He recently listened to our uncensored episode, and he said he loved it, and so that's why I'm inducting him tonight.
That's right. Somewhat instrumental in the making of this podcast, and a guy
he does not have X-Pac heat with us.
No, absolutely not. Or 6 heat, for that matter. He is part of the pantheon of, I guess, survey says fans of the month with very cool names. Brock Everline joins Kurt Kilberg, and I think still my favorite, Coco Weaver.
Yes.
That's good too.
Among others. I mean, this we're talking just tippy top here, but all so many cool names and so many cool inductees into the Survey Says Fan of the Month Club.
Have you guys considered getting a jingle for Fan of the Month?
Well, perhaps. Wonder if we know anyone who has talents in that capacity.
I think David Sunday's pretty good, yeah.
Oh, David Sunday. Wow. Yeah. Easy like David Sunday, huh?
Yeah. It can work.
Perhaps we'll revisit that. But does that conclude our administrative business?
Just one other thing. You had mentioned on that uncensored episode that there was a 1991 uncensored, and I actually did some digging into the archives. And I think I found a promo advertising that pay-per-view.
Steiners, diamonds, bears, wizards, rules are for fools. It's WCW 1991 uncensored. Z-Man, Stinger, Russians, a monkey. Sullivan is a druid. It's WCW 1991 uncensored.
Good God!
Wow, this is an incredible find.
This is a first time. This is a world premiere.
Man,
to my knowledge, this is incredible, Andy. How did you ever find this from the old Turner archives?
You used your resources, no doubt, from the world of entertainment that you work at. This is, you can't get this on the network, folks.
No,
I don't think you'll ever find that on the network.
The only thing I can say to that is, good God.
Wow. So there you have it. 1991 WCW Uncensored. Almost lost to the history books. So glad we could be the proper custodians of this. Amazing.
Tremendous.
We are no longer talking uncensored, but we still remain uncensored. Here on our 12th episode of WCW Survey Says. We were talking before break about the rapid expansion of the nWo that occurred in the early part of 1997. You had in very short order new members such as one VK Wall Street, Big Bubber, Buff Bagwell. You had Scott Norton. Anyone else I'm forgetting?
Oh,
Conan.
Gosh.
Conan was a little later in the year, I think, right?
True. Yeah, it's it would have been post uncensored, I think. Who else was there? Bryan Adams. When did he debut?
He was not until the next year. He was in 98.
Oh, okay.
Oh. And, I mean, the entirety of 1997 is pretty much the world versus the New World Order. They put everybody on notice. And this is where you get the great promos with just, as I said, a million guys in the ring. Bischoff and Hogan just jerking themselves off. You know, guys cutting up in the back behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Bagwell mugging for the camera.
Bagwell always mugging for the camera, no doubt. Guys potentially a little bit sloshed, not in the right frame of mind necessarily. Of course, you also get the debut of the nWo B Team music.
Oh, so, amazing!
Just goes to show how big this group got, that they could have not only the proper iconic entrance music, but to just sort of further the brand. They could create an entrance theme that lets you know this is a guy who's doing the job for us.
Yes.
I mean,
and Andy, you're something of a musicologist. I want to ask you a question or pose something to you, and you can react to it, everyone. I've always felt that if you can't groove to the nWo B Team song, then you have no musical taste whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think the guys that always got the real main nWo theme. And by the way, we'd be remiss and not mentioning Randy Savage joined the group.
Oh yeah,
Super Brawl 1997.
Yeah,
so,
after weeks of sitting in the stands with Sting.
That's right, wearing black, but not seeming like he was aligned with the New World Order. But sure enough,
alongside and rejoins his old flame Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of themes, though, one that I forgot about, and it's actually like a really good one too, was like Eric Bischoff's theme back then.
Yep.
Oh, I've forgotten about that too. I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, he had his own theme song, and yeah, that was a real song, wasn't it? Like not like a hit that anybody knew, but I think it was an actual, not just produced for WCW Eric Bischoff. It wasn't bad music, right?
I'm not too sure where that one came from.
We would have to revisit our theme music episode. I think we talked about it, but
to answer your question, Tim, I think the ones that came out to the main theme were Macho Man.
Yeah.
Hogan, or Hogan had Voodoo Child, I think. Voodoo Child, or at least would have eventually developed that throughout 97. Hall and Nash came out to the main song. Six came out to the main song.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody else got the B Team song.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And Savage got like kind of a cool mod to the theme. Or it would have
occasionally thrown in there. Yeah. We haven't talked about the voiceover guy.
No, we need to talk about the voiceover guy and the voiceovers themselves.
Yes.
How do you even, like, these just have to be seen to be understood. Production that you did not see in World Championship Wrestling, and that it was good. I mean, it was they were well produced. They were a lot of quick cuts, very slick, and all black and white. Almost sort of a, I don't know, surreal quality to them, where it just kind of goes in and out.
Unlike anything that had been seen before in wrestling.
Or like propaganda.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. So they did so many of those. And I don't know who the voiceover guy was, if that was anybody, right?
Yeah. Tony actually, I think, may have mentioned it on one of the podcasts, that it was like one of those production guys, like that he wasn't a name anyone would recognize, but like I love the voiceover. Like you hear the new world order, the biggest icon in wrestling. all of that
Yep.
stuff, and that was great. But the best was it sold out.
Right.
When he would insult the WCW wrestlers when they come out to no music, and it's just silence. And then when you least expect it, Eddie Guerrero is walking to the ring, and there's just silence, right? And you don't, out of nowhere, here comes Loser. And then it's like he gets in the ring, and it's like after silence again, it's like the Mexican jumping bean, Eddie Guerrero. Just
terrible.
Just so it's the timing. It's the timing that just gets me every time I watch that show. It's like, and then same thing for everybody that comes out. It's like loser. Loser.
And I mean,
anyway.
that's sold out. Not a great pay-per-view entering. But as we've talked about in the past, one of those awesome, just high concept ideas that WCW put out there. Now the nWo, kind of at their peak of popularity and relevance, getting their own pay-per-view, so to speak. Very much worth watching. Again, not really for the work rate, but just to see something that you had never seen up to that point, and still quite different from anything that you've seen since. Like they kind of, they did many solds out, but this first one was kind of as far out there as they got conceptually.
Hey Tim, that's kind of a good segue for a point. You followed Impact closer than I did. I was kind of in and out on that, but the nWo was that cool gang, the cool heels. But then when you get to this sold out pay-per-view, it is really weird, and it stands out like a sore thumb. They've got the motorcycles and some chick contest, beauty contest, but it's biker chicks. And it started making me think if there was no Hall and Nash, that seemed like that's Eric Bischoff's pure vision for the nWo, maybe a biker gang. And then it got the wheels turned in my head that's what Aces and Eights was, a biker gang. So do you think Aces and Eights is kind of really close to the nWo in that regard?
I honestly had never thought of that before until you just mentioned it. But yeah, absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, Eric has always been, and is to this day, as far as I know, a big motorcycle guy. He's always been into that culture of riding bikes. And, the knock on him was always, he didn't want to run the company. He just wanted to ride bikes with the guys or whatever. And so, that makes sense to me, because Aces and Eights, if you look at it structurally, has a lot of similarities to the nWo angle, except that it had an actual conclusion, but that it did stretch on too long, much like the nWo angle, and it was so tied into that bike culture, and that and yet they did still do the whole mystery members and guys getting kicked out and stuff like that you do with the nWo. That's a great analysis there. I'd never put that together, but I think for people that may have watched Impact at that time, that makes a lot of sense why Eric would have gone back to that well.
Cause it seems like that would be his pure vision for what the nWo would have been. But then you had Hall and Nash in there, who are just who are the cool heels, and they made it so much cooler than just being a wrestling stable.
Right, because that's the thing with Aces and Eights is it was a pure heel concept, whereas the nWo, yes, they were heels, but they were heels that didn't mind if you cheered for them.
And I think that at that point, the whole, for lack of a better term, biker culture was somewhat more relevant when Aces and Eights was coming up. You had, Sons of Anarchy, which everybody watched. So you could maybe get away with doing a very pure sort of biker gang faction in a way that you maybe couldn't in a mainstream wrestling promotion in 1996 through 1999 thereabouts. But I've heard people liken the nWo to a biker gang. Like in some of those, I think it's on the Monday Night Wars retrospectives on the network. I don't know. I can't remember who, but somebody makes that comparison that, yeah, nWo was just like kind of this huge biker gang. And I mean, of course, we talked about how they had Hog Wild and Road Wild, and just how that was a pretty major element of just their image, that I very much see that as well.
Or even when you think about it, when you split off the Hollywood faction in like '98, they had the Disciple, who basically looked like a biker guy. He had the beard and like the chaps and the leather. Yep. Then they had Horace, who kind of had the same look. I think Norton always wore vests and stuff. So those guys, and even Bryan Adams, those guys could basically be like a biker gang right there.
Yes, the only one that would really like, I guess the ones that would stick out like a sore thumb would have been, you know, Bagwell and and Scott Steiner.
Or Stevie Ray with his like referee stripes. He'd kind of stand out.
That's true. Yeah, Stevie Ray.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, man, what a member, Stevie Ray. But gosh, you know, 97, it's not huge on major angles for the group as such, other than just
the Sting feud.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's running throughout the entire year, and a lot of it is, you know, smoke and mirrors and sort of spinning their wheels for as long as possible.
Right.
You do get the Dennis Rodman stuff.
Yeah.
Rod the bod, dude.
Yeah. He makes his debut at Uncensored in 97, which we talked about on our last show. He has his first match at Bash at the Beach, tagging with Hogan against Luger and the Giant. He does a pretty impressive leapfrog, and everyone lost their mind.
Can I do the call?
Please do.
Dennis Rodman just did an arm drag.
That's it.
All I remember about that match.
But did he do a full arm drag and twist?
You know, that's the thing is, I don't think he did because Tony didn't say full arm drag and twist.
Which is odd, because by his own reckoning, he said he would call that whether they did it or not. So, I don't know. Maybe he was just too worked up.
He was just too surprised that Dennis Rodman actually achieved an arm drag in the match.
Yeah.
Now that you've told me about that on like Tony's podcast and how it's even got a shirt now, that is all that I hear now every time I'm watching like a Nitro or a Thunder.
Yes. When I was a kid, I thought he was saying full arm dragged twist, like DRAGGED for some reason.
Dragged, okay.
Yeah, full arm dragged twist. But now I hear dragon too, and it's tremendous.
Wow.
I wonder where he got that from.
I don't know. It must have just become automatic and just entered his lexicon and never left. Somewhat early in his career.
Oh, we also, another thing that we got in early 97, actually before Rodman, I think, was the, or maybe it was in 98. I think it was early 97, the attempted vehicular homicide of the Steiner brothers by the Outsiders.
Oh, God. Yes. This is hilarious. It really is. The Outsiders basically just try to run the Steiner brothers off the road. And actually, they succeed. I mean,
they succeed.
Try. Yeah. And the Steiners.
The only thing that saved the Steiners' lives was Rick Steiner's earmuffs.
But it's great. I mean, they don't just drive off the road. No, they drive off the road, up an embankment, and flip. It's outstanding.
While the Outsiders are filming it on a hand cam and giggling like Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah. Well, after that happens, they go, "Oh, I don't know, man. You think we should stop?"
We should stop.
It just ends. It just ends. Clearly, they did not stop. Oh my God! Yeah, the endless feud between the Outsiders and the Steiners. That I think was a real highlight. It didn't get any better than that.
Yes, because WCW basically had no other legitimate tag teams that anyone would buy as a threat to the Outsiders.
Right. Well, and then you had weirdness like what I like to call the administrative powers explode with Eric Bischoff versus Dr. Harvey Schiller makes some appearances. Mm-hmm. He suspends Bischoff at one point, and that doesn't really go anywhere.
No.
You had J.J. Dillon, of course,
right.
making frequent appearances and being that somewhat impotent figurehead of WCW, which in a way, like, people complain about. And I mean, I see why. He doesn't make for great television or great podcasting by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't know. Here again, it has that meta element to it, right?
Right.
Where not only does he just kind of suck, and WCW was kind of in disarray and very disorganized and couldn't do anything right. And you're seeing that sort of play out on camera in the way that they're framing this storyline.
Yeah, and once you work in the real world, you learn that most bosses are kind of like the on-screen persona of J.J. Dillon.
Yes,
where they're just kind of bland and milquetoast and wholly uninteresting as individuals.
Right. And you very often will find yourself on the other side of the equation working for someone like an Eric Bischoff.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, true to form, really.
Yeah, it was. I agree with you, and I would take J.J. Dillon's tenure as on-screen liaison or whatever he was from the executive committee over having a weekly GM any day of the week.
Oh my God.
But that's just that's kind of off topic. But and we also had evil referee Nick Patrick, which I think is actually an unsung, really important part of the NWO in those that first year in particular.
Yeah, no, that's true. They kind of got their own referee in a sense. He shows favoritism for the NWO and gets in a little feud with Chris Jericho, then babyface Chris Jericho. Jericho had a match with him with one arm tied behind his back. It's tremendous.
I forgot how well that kind of angle kind of played out with Nick Patrick, because even at that the first Hog Wild, I think he kind of hits Luger's knee and it kind of like does like a block or whatever, like a chop block.
That's
thing.
Right.
But he kind of did it like he staggered, so it looks like it was an accident, but it was the kind of cool thing.
Right. Yeah. And I can say at that time, see, I was very young when I remember the Danny Davis angle in the WWF, and I only vaguely remember it, like when it was happening. Only the tail end of it, maybe watching the WrestleMania 3 VHS or whatever. But like you really didn't see heel referee storylines that much, so it was kind of new hat for me at the time, and I think for a lot of kids.
Yeah, and this is getting somewhat ahead, but we're coming up on it anyway. But I would implore you to watch some of the Nick Patrick promos in early 1998, which I've recently done, not intentionally, but just happened upon them. This is after the whole Starrcade 97 debacle between Hogan and Sting. Nick Patrick has found himself suspended after the events of Starrcade 97. And he is cutting these phenomenal heel promos talking about how everyone's out to get him. There's this conspiracy. He showed no favoritism in that match, which is actually true. But he's doing it in such a way. It's similar to Bret Hart's 97 WWF heel run, where what he's saying, he's actually right, but he's being so self-righteous about it that he's an asshole. And I'm like, there was a missed opportunity somewhere to use him as a heel manager for somebody. He would have just been an awesome mouthpiece. And I never knew he could do that kind of character work.
Who did? Yeah, who did? I think everybody probably assumed he would sound like Earl Hebner when he talked. You know?
Yeah, no doubt. But no, he carries himself with a lot of poise and so much conviction, and what he's saying you don't entirely disagree with, but it's just the way he's doing it. You can't help but root against him. It's good stuff.
When did they do the angle with was it Pee Wee Anderson? They did the angle with. I thought that was really compelling stuff.
Yeah. Bischoff fires him.
Yeah.
Where Bischoff just came off as this, like, I mean, just this completely unlikable douche, you know, like such a slimy move to pull where, like, they bring his kids out and everything, and Bischoff still fires him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that because that's one that I went back and I was watching a lot of Nitros in, like, January and I guess kind of around the sold out into Super Brawl stuff because I wanted to see all the Giant stuff where he was kind of going after Hogan. And yeah, they just do like a cold open, I think, for one Nitro. And Bischoff and the Outsiders are like at the commentary thing. And they're like, well, we're going to start off the show with a big piece of business. And then they bring out Randy Anderson.
Yep. And the whole, the thing with the kids, tell your dad he's still fired.
Oh my God. Like, and it's weird because, like, on the one hand, it's one of the most despicable things. Like, it's just such an asshole thing to do. But on the other hand, the part of you that just appreciates good villainy, that I think a lot of kids have, or at least I had, where I was just on the one hand, I was like, oh, what a bastard. And on the other hand, I was like, God, that's the freaking funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I know.
Yeah, that whole the year of 97 to me. I mean, I know everybody loves the formative year of 96, but to me, 97 is like peak NWO. Like, all that stuff is the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. But I mean,
well,
there's just so much. I mean, you get the Horseman parody, of course.
Oh man, I was going to say we can't sleep on one of the major additions to the NWO and Kurt Hennig.
Yes,
doing the swerve, which one of my favorite. That's got to be my favorite, like, defection to the NWO. The way they did that, even though I think a lot of people say it was kind of obvious the way they did it, but it was still executed so
very well,
so perfectly that I love it. And like you said, that parody is just. I mean, they were a heat-seeking missile. Is just the only way I can put it.
Oh, absolutely. And that was I mean, I'd already started to really love NWO promos anyway, because they were just so much better than everybody else at that point, you know, short of Flair maybe. But then, like, that was kind of our first exposure, I think, to comedic genius Kevin Nash.
True. Yeah.
Because that was beyond anything DX did later on. That was like, that was like peak wrestling comedy, man. Like that, I didn't even understand most of the references he's making about, like, Arn drinking. I'd never heard that. I didn't know that was a thing about Arn drinking. Sure. I just thought it was funny. I thought it was silly and funny. He's like, the significance of that's the hand I use to open beer cans with. I'm a man. And of course, the great line, I'm a man of average height, average weight, average skill.
Yes. Average carpentry skills.
Average carpentry skills.
The pause before it, too. The average carpentry skills.
You know, one thing you could say when Arn Anderson was coming to town, besides the fact that I left a lot of unpaid bar tabs, was Arn Anderson was coming to town. And you knew if I was on the card, I was going to give you 100%. No matter how drunk, how hungover I was going to give you all I had. And back in those days before the NWO, you 8 people that bought those tickets got one heck of a show.
That's the side of Kevin Nash that we needed more of all the time, because you just can't get enough of comedy Kevin Nash.
Right. And do you remember, speaking of the administrative wars of this time period, how some of these newer members like Big Bubber and VK Wall Street kind of washed out, and
yes,
they were made to leave the NWO because something about their contracts where it was like, no, they're not allowed to leave WCW or something ridiculous that really didn't make any sort of sense in terms of storytelling, but they did it anyway. And
it was basically them wanting to, quote, trim the fat a little bit, probably, because then they changed Big Bubber's name to his real name of Ray Traylor. Remember?
Yeah. Well, and for a while, even though they weren't officially aligned with the NWO, they were still like anti-WCW and competing on like Saturday night and black t-shirts with the WCW logo crossed out. I mean, it was like not brand X NWO. Remember?
Ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
And then I guess Ray Traylor repented and became accepted again because he tagged up with the Steiners.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he became somewhat of a guardian to the Steiners after that.
Yeah. Almost as if he was sent from above.
All right, from on high, an angel. The Giant left at the beginning of the year, so that, I guess, continuing the trend about his fourth turn.
And during the year, we got the formation of one of my favorite tag teams of the era, Vicious and Delicious.
Yep, no doubt. Buff Bagwell, Scott Norton. So Buff still kind of a tag guy in the NWO, but having some more character onto himself that you hadn't seen prior to this, but
not at all. I mean, he's displaying more personality at this point than we've ever seen from him before.
But gives both of them something to do as kind of utility guys, I guess.
Yeah, this was also the time period when I became a massive, inexplicable mark for Scott Flash Norton. I loved watching him destroy guys on Nitro. He had the most vicious power bomb, I think, to this day that I've ever seen in wrestling. And I would just love watching him wrestle like just some random dude on Nitro, La Parka or some such, and he just crush him, just run right through him with no selling everything, chopping and power bombing and walking off.
That guy is just like all shoulder. He's just made of a shoulder.
He is the living embodiment of the block from the THQ N64 video games. Like when you hold the R button,
yes,
the trigger, and you poke your chest out,
Yes,
he's the living embodiment of that pose.
Oh my God, that is a deep cut, but I know what you're talking about.
The arms go behind your body almost,
Yes. Wow. So, but yeah, I mean, that, I guess, kind of ties a bow on 97. And what you say about Kevin Nash becomes somewhat of a problem that I guess they try to turn into a positive in 98, where you get the split, right? So, and it actually starts with Macho Man and Hogan at the very beginning of the year, like the very first Nitro of the year, in fact. There's some tensions between the two of them, not really stemming from anything directly. So it's kind of like one of those, they must have had a very rich interior life, these NWO members. There's a lot that would go on behind the scenes.
Right. We're suddenly starting around the early 98, we're suddenly starting to get like swipes between Hogan and Savage about their respective wives,
Right.
Like, you think I'm not a man? Ask your wife.
Lip quiver.
Yes, the lip quiver.
The only appropriate response to that, But no,
you were dead, you son of a bitch. Hogan should have said that to every opponent.
Yeah.
I thought you were dead, brother.
Oh my God. Yeah, that'll be coming up too. Holy shit. But yeah, I mean the whole thing starts with Savage, and they have a match that's uncensored, that terrible cage match that we talked about.
Yep, I was there live.
Oh my God.
So it was such a great show until that point.
Yeah. That, much like story of WCW pay-per-views, right? Excellent undercard, shit main event. So God, I didn't know you were there live.
Yes, that was my first wrestling pay-per-view I ever went to, because it was in Mobile, Alabama.
Okay. So what a treat to to have you for your first pay-per-view and to share that experience with the world now.
Yes.
But
the only time in my life I ever got to see Bret Hart wrestle in person. And it was at freaking Uncensored.
Lucky you. Yeah, that was his match with Kurt Hennig, right?
Yes.
SummerSlam 1991, it was not.
It was not, no. It was my favorite wrestler of all time, and that's the only time I got to see him wrestle, was in a half-hearted replica of a match that happened years earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
You know what stands out to me, what stands out in my mind about that match, and we didn't talk about this on our last episode, and I'm kind of glad we didn't now, was the involvement of Rick Rude in that. I don't know if you've watched this match recently or can remember, but you know, Rude did his typical interference, helping on Hennig's behalf, which he did throughout their nWo run together. But at the end of the match, after Bret wins, I mean, Rude gets in there and starts fucking him up. He like hits the Rude Awakening at one point. He's taking bumps, and I'm like, holy shit. And I had heard Rick Rude was training for a comeback at some point in 98 before he died. And that whole segment kind of lends credence to the theory in my mind.
Yeah, I remember him getting physically involved, but I don't remember like the details of it. Like that, it's kind of, that match is kind of hazy to me, except for the finish. And because I'm trying to remember from my live experience, the main memories I have of that show are Dean Malenko, You're a Loser, and that match. I remember Bret because it was my only time I got to see him, but mainly remember the finish of that one. I remember almost the entire Sting and Scott Hall match. And then, of course, the triple threat hardcore match. I remember that really well. And then I remember the main event and just being utterly confused by almost everything that was happening.
Right. No, yeah. But as well you should have been, because, you know, Savage and Hogan are having their match. Sting comes down, and then they both just attack Sting. And it's sort of like, well, are they back on the same page here? Was this just a total ruse? Like, what was the deal here? But come to find out, their feud would continue. Went unresolved. Savage actually winning the world title from Sting at Spring Stampede a month later. Cutting Sting's run with the title short. I know we've kind of glossed over the whole Sting-Hogan feud, but tune into episode 3 for that. we covered that in the Sting episode to great detail, I feel like. So, yeah, I mean, it was just weird how Sting never really got to run with the ball. Some would say he was not in the right mindset to do so at the time, but in any case, title goes on to Savage. You think, where's this headed? And where it's headed is right back onto Hogan. It's the very next night, Hogan beats Savage for the title, despite interference from Kevin Nash on Macho Man's behalf, because it is Bret Hart who actually comes in and essentially gives the win to Hollywood Hogan. And that prompts Roddy Piper to confront Bret Hart. Why? Why do it, Bret? Why? And Bret pops him in the face, I do believe.
Yeah, I think so. And that begins
a few times.
That begins something that I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Right. So now we're pretty much full split here within the nWo. You've got Nash and, to a lesser extent, I guess, Hall as Nash's tag team partner on one side, with Randy Savage and Hollywood and his cronies on the other. Everybody has to essentially stake their claim and make it known which side are you on, which they do by taking off their T-shirts, essentially, and revealing the colors: red and black for Wolfpack, or black and white for Hollywood. I don't know. I guess I see why they did this. Kevin Nash is getting over. He's getting face pops. He's the cool heel. Of course, they did the angle earlier that year where the power bomb, the jackknife, was banned after he dropped the giant on his head. So, and that was, I think, a pretty interesting angle and some good storytelling, but had the effect of just getting him more over because he kept doing it and they would make such a big deal about it. And that's good stuff too, if you go back and look at it. The power bomb being banned, and he would get fined and arrested and thrown out, screaming Attica the whole way.
Attica, yeah.
Get this on tape! Attica!
More references that Kevin Nash is foisting upon the wrestling viewers.
And I can tell you, as a 14-year-old, I had no freaking clue what that meant.
Yeah.
But you know what we were doing at school the next day? Saying Attica.
And your teachers are going, who let these kids watch Dog Day Afternoon?
Right. So, yeah, it was interesting because this is the time when Nash kind of like you said, was getting face pops, and it just makes him cooler when he's doing the powerbomb when he's told he couldn't. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense from that standpoint to do the split.
Now, do you remember who the original membership of the Red and Black Wolfpack was here in mid-1998?
Let me see if I can get it on first guess. Is it, okay, you got Nash, Savage, Lex Luger, Conan, Kurt Hennig.
That's right.
And Ravishing Rick Rude.
Yep. And I guess you could count Scott Hall sort of for a minute.
Yeah, and then I have a theory that I would like to postulate about this whole split, and that is that there are two giant mistakes with the split that were made.
Ooh, because I hope you might be onto something.
Oh, well, go ahead, Andy, by all means.
Oh no, you.
Okay, so number one, and the one that you would expect me to go on about the most, I'm sure, is Sting. Sting didn't make any sense joining the Wolfpack. I think it was a catastrophic, from a story perspective and from a fan perspective, a catastrophically stupid decision to align Sting with these guys he's been fighting against for the better part of 2 years. Made zero sense at all to do that. And I will never be swayed otherwise, no matter how my younger friends like Nick will try to convince me, well, it was worth it because of how cool Wolfpack Sting looked. And not to me. The story was not there. The other, number two, the other catastrophic mistake that I've come to realize is nobody wanted, it's almost like the Hardy Boys syndrome. Nobody wanted Scott Hall and Kevin Nash at odds with each other.
Right.
And I think if you're going to do the Wolfpack, it's got to be the Wolfpack. You got to go in. You got to have Hall and Nash. They're a package deal, man. And I think splitting them off, I don't think either guy really ever recovered from that long term with regards to perception. Yes, Nash had his big 98, but like, you know, it just wasn't the same. Like, I didn't want to see Hall and Nash at odds with each other. I wanted to see them standing next to each other, cracking jokes, you know?
That was almost kind of something that, yeah, I agree with you. And that's almost something that I was thinking when watching this stuff and going back and seeing, you know, where the split started and how they got to being into two factions. Because I didn't really remember. It all seemed kind of muddy or like murky and stuff. But how Hall had won the title shot, and then he ended up using it later because they did the rematch and stuff. It almost seemed like when Savage was splitting off, Hall was with him. It seemed like they were going to push those two guys as the faces, but then it ended up like somehow by the spring, it ended up being like Nash as the clear face, and Hall like stayed as the heel and stayed in line with Hogan. And I was like, shit, why didn't they do that with Hall? The dude, he was a face in WWF and like had a good run, so why didn't they take it off that in that direction? Because he could even have the beef too. Hey, like, I didn't get my title shot against you, Hogan, and you're keeping me, you know, out of the picture. But then I started thinking too, and I was telling this to Tim in a text, I think, and I was saying they could have kept, you know, the two outsiders as the Wolfpack and said, hey, look, this NWO is getting too big, and we're going to take it apart, you know, by ourselves. We started it, we're going to finish it. That could have been a good ending for it right there.
Absolutely. And if you remember, as far back as early 97, Hall, Nash, and Six were referring to themselves as the Wolfpack. And it was part of a group of subgroups within the NWO. They were the Wolfpack. It was Hall, Nash, and Six. So it would have, I completely agree with you, Andy. People, just like everybody says that nobody wanted to see the Hardy Boys fight each other. It's the same thing with the outsiders. People didn't want to see them at odds. You wanted to see them standing next to each other, cracking jokes. And I think turning them into a babyface act was a natural progression from where things were going. But that doesn't mean because they're babyfaces, they get along with all the WCW guys. No, they needed to be that cool outsider group still and kind of regain some of the coolness that the NWO was starting to lose by early 98.
And if anybody could play edgy babyfaces, it's those two guys. They absolutely could have pulled that off. And Hogan could have retained his heel heat. It's not like Hogan was getting cheers. It was really maybe by association with Nash, he was getting, you know, the kind of cool NWO heel pops, but you separate Hogan from Nash and he's still the total shit heel fuckwad who everybody hates.
He's still the guy who refers to his followers as NWOites.
Yes.
Which is questionable nomenclature at best.
Right. And he's still paired with Bischoff, who, again, heat magnet. So, I mean, they could have pulled this thing off, and I just don't understand.
And you even had a pecking order in the NWO at that time where it was easy to replace Hall and Nash a rung down with Bagwell, who was starting to get mega heel heat with his, you know, narcissist kind of gimmick, and then Scott Steiner, who just turns in early 98.
Yep.
And, you know, it took him, I mean, clearly it took him several months to find his character, but you had this pecking order where they could have promoted guys to a little bit higher level and had them fill in that role of the hateable version of the outsiders.
And you had the Giant going back to the NWO, siding with Hollywood, so he's almost a logical replacement for Nash. It was almost like those two could never cooperate, could never be on the same side.
Right. And it's almost like with his near-death experience of being dropped on his what Brock Lesnar would call his noggin, it would behoove to almost make sense where he would be willing to put aside his hatred of Hogan for his hatred of Nash.
Yeah.
So that made sense. What does not make sense is the Sting turn. And honestly, what are your thoughts on the Luger turn? Because I think an argument could be made that it makes just as little sense.
Yeah, no, I'm totally in your camp on Sting. Always have been, always will be. Again, see episode 3. Luger is an interesting case because, I mean, we've talked about how Luger was the guy, on the ground week to week in Sting's absence, trying to carry the torch and benefiting greatly from that. I mean, he had the Cup of Coffee title run with Hogan in 97, but he got probably the most over he had been in his career outside of, I don't know, maybe when he debuted in the 80s. So he was through and through a WCW guy. It's just they sort of lost him in the booking in 98, I feel like. He started the year out pretty hot and then just kind of lost some steam. He had 2 just nothing pay-per-view matches with Savage, who wasn't even really feuding with him. And I can't even remember. I think he did some stuff with Scott Steiner after the latter turned. But as you said, Greg, Steiner was still trying to find his heel character and figure that out. And just Luger didn't have a whole lot going on. So I guess you could make a case for it, but logically, you don't see him siding with a Kevin Nash either after he spent so much of the year in 97. Wasn't that long ago that he's having, match after match with Kevin Nash or in tags with the Giant, in combinations against Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. So
right.
Why is he so eager to join them?
It's kind of like this.
And Savage, too. I mean, like I said, he was feuding with Savage just a few months before that. And Savage is, a charter member of this Wolfpack here. So what are we doing?
It's kind of like in this situation with, like, the Wolfpack. It's kind of like the same thing with Billy Gunn with DX. It's like when the guys are kind of the cool heels, it works. But then when they went all the way face with DX, they became kind of like like pandering, and it just, it just wasn't as cool anymore. And I see Lex Luger as being the Billy Gunn or whatever too. It's like
that's a good.
That guy's not
That's
cool
a good comparison,
at all.
Yeah.
You're right. You take somebody who's kind of naturally unhip, like a Billy Gunn, like a Lex Luger. You can sort of camouflage it a little bit, but once they become more proper baby faces, like you said, Andy, playing to the crowd, pandering a bit, that starts to become more apparent how kind of lame those guys are at the end of
And the worst thing, we haven't even talked about the worst thing of Luger joining the Wolfpack. We lost that awesome theme song.
Oh, yeah.
Because he started coming out to the Wolfpack song, which was good itself, but it wasn't worth losing the great Lex Luger entrance theme.
Yeah, and you would never hear it again. It's not like he went back to that at any point.
Nope, it was gone forever.
I've even heard it on the WWF around that time. They used it for like their hotline things. Call it the hotline. And it was like, and it played that Luger music.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
That's just as mind-blowing as when I heard it on the radio for the first time for some car lot commercial. I was like, my God, that's Lex Luger's theme song from WCW. And then, like, the next commercial would play the Hardy Boys theme song from the WWF.
Yeah, that's a big one. And, I mean, at first, the Wolfpack, there was genuine intrigue just surrounding where does everybody stand? Because the NWO is so huge. There's a lot of, these, let's face it, these job guy members who they could go any which way. You could conceivably have a Buff Bagwell, who, by the way, was injured at the time. He had suffered the neck injury, I believe, that April in 98, which you can watch on Thunder now on the WCW network. Yeah, let's leave that in. You can watch that on Thunder on the WWE network. So I think he had been off television for a little while, but he was making his return still in the neck brace, not wrestling, and he wouldn't wrestle for a while until the next year. But he could conceivably side with Kevin Nash, I felt like.
Yes, that would have made.
Is Scott Keith doing his dishes or something?
No, I think it was a dryer. It was in the background.
Yes,
Scott Keith cast. But Scott Steiner was a guy who I could have seen joining the Wolfpack. But for the most part, I mean, it's Nash, it's Savage who goes out. He has a knee injury, like that summer, so he disappears pretty quickly. Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude were basically like plants, I think was the explanation.
Yeah. Never liked that.
I kind of liked that.
Well, I mean, I don't get me wrong. On the one hand, I didn't like them joining the Wolfpack in the first place, but I guess it does make sense that they would have been plants.
So that was a thing. That was after Conan lost to Goldberg at Great American Bash, very quickly, I might add. So that put a smile on my face. And they turn on Conan, return to nWo Hollywood, and that kind of leaves just Nash, Conan, Luger, and Sting. And Luger and Sting didn't have much going on that summer, I felt like.
No. The big moment for Sting was the Nitro match against Goldberg.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was like in September, I think.
Right.
And I mean, it was just what started out as, okay, there's this huge power struggle, between huge, equally over factions of the New World Order, kind of just became, it's Kevin Nash and a couple of guys as like a splinter group, and that was it.
Yeah, and I feel like Hogan both wasn't around that much to do the angle, and also when he was around, he was diverted with feuds with DDP or the Ultimate Warrior later in the year when he came back.
Yeah.
So we really never got any kind of progression of the Wolfpack Hollywood feud. It became muddied in Kevin Nash's quest for the world title and Hulk Hogan's quest for whatever the hell was the Warrior feud.
Right. You're right. They didn't spend much time directly feuding. After the initial split, it was like, all right, now we're just going to go our separate ways. Here's the Black and White, who, by the way, are adding a whole bunch new, B team members to replace.
Oh, it felt like the nWo Hollywood was just exploding every week with new members. Like the Wolfpack was shrinking and Hollywood was just growing exponentially with, Stevie Ray and Bryan Adams and of course we didn't even mention nWo Japan, which formed in mid '97. So you have Muda and Tenzan and Chono. And then you've got just various ancillary members of the nWo, and you have they never actually put Bret Hart in the Black and the White, even though he would come out for every nWo Black and White promo, and he would sit in the corner in the background and smile awkwardly. They would make it clear. He would say, Hogan would say, the Hitman's not a part of the Black and the White, dude, but he knows that the offer's out there anytime he wants to join, brah.
And I think that whole deal was Bret helped Hogan regain the title because Bret thought that he should be the guy to take the title from Hogan. Well, step one, in order to do that, Hogan has to be the champion. Somewhat circular logic, but okay. And step two in that plan just kind of never happened. So He's protecting, looking out for Hogan's best interest, making sure the title stays on him so that he can be the one to take it from him. Boy, did he drop the ball when Goldberg took out Hogan, huh? That didn't take long.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was just, I remember, like, I was like, okay, just join the NWO. Like, I didn't want to join the NWO in the first place. I thought it was miscasting or whatever, but, like, I remember talking with my friends about it, and they were just like, why don't you just join at this point? Like, he's clearly in the group. Like, why doesn't he just join? So just sitting in the corner, like, just doing weird stuff.
And I mean, that's the thing. He even at the terrible War Games in '98, where it was the 3 teams of 3. Do you remember who represented NWO Hollywood?
Stevie Ray.
Yes.
And I don't remember who else besides Stevie Ray.
Okay, it was Stevie Ray, Hogan, and Brett.
Oh, wow.
So if he's not a member, why? I mean, it's just it got to the point just beyond absurdity where he, for all intents and purposes, was a member and then would act like he was leaving, but it was a big swerve. He did that at least twice that same year, one of which led into the pretty good feud with Sting, which resulted in a pretty mediocre match at Halloween Havoc. The feud itself, I thought, was a bit of a highlight.
Yes, I agree with that. And we also got that was actually the last we would see of Wolfpack Sting.
Yeah, it sure was.
He would go away after that Halloween Havoc match, and he would return as Showtime Sting. So really that was kind of the end of the Wolfpack, because at that point the Wolfpack's just Kevin Nash and K-Dog, right?
Kevin Nash, K-Dog. I guess you still count Luger. But that goes into Starrcade, where Nash does defeat Goldberg with a little help, and we get the most infamous angle of all time, perhaps in WCW history, finger poke of doom. I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, basically, it's the great reconstruction period of the New World Order, where it's this master plan to basically get the title back onto Hogan, which they do in January. Hogan and Nash have the match. Nash goes down after a finger poke. Hogan pins him, and this is also where people forget Lex Luger turns heel.
Yes.
Because Goldberg comes out and he's trying to fight off Nash and Hogan. Luger runs to the ring and they think, oh, okay, Luger's going to restore order. He's going to help Goldberg, and he ends up racking him.
Yep.
So immediately we kind of know the lay of the land. It's going to be Nash. It's Hall, who's been on the sidelines for the better part of several months now. But we know that he is back in the fold properly. You got Hogan. So the big 3 are now reunited with Lex Luger and with Scott Steiner and Buff Bagwell as well. And that they become known as, what do you want to call it? NWO
Elite. Yep.
Yeah.
The red, black, and white.
That's right.
Which were pretty cool shirts, I got to say. Those shirts were pretty hot at the time.
They were pretty cool, yeah. And they continued using the Wolfpack music. So you can almost see it as Hogan wanting to cash in and capitalize on the Wolfpack's popularity, but get that fuck money back again too, with the heat surrounding Nash and Hall. Especially turning in this fashion. Steiner and Buff are an interesting inclusion, I thought. People also forget that Scott Steiner briefly became the leader of NWO Hollywood at the end of '98. Do you remember this?
Yes, because Hogan left to become president of the United States.
Yes. So Hulk Hogan has declared he's running for president after his ill-fated feud with the Warrior, which notice we didn't talk about.
Yeah, like not to go too far deep down another like rabbit hole, but talking about Steiner in charge of that faction of the NWO, that World War III '98, and like the show kind of sucked, but the crowd was so hot for that, and like there was a bunch of storylines that they could have done. Actually, like a bunch of different directions they could go from that show, because you had Goldberg and they were squaring off. He was squared off with like Steiner. Crowd was hot for that. Then Bam Bam Bigelow came out later, and those two guys were brawling on the floor and had to get separated while the World War III Battle Royal was going on. Then you also had like Nash and Hall fighting off like Steiner's NWO, and so it's like they could have didn't even have to go with Nash and like Goldberg. I guess they could have. I think they were setting up a whole bunch of guys for Goldberg there.
Yeah, a lot of missed opportunities there. You're right.
You know, and I think that there was, if you look at how to use a modern example, the way the Bullet Club storyline has evolved, where the snake consumes itself almost, where you start with Finn Balor and he's the leader, and then AJ takes over from him. And then and he gets the boot or whatever, and then Kenny Omega turns on AJ and takes over leadership of the club and pushes him to the side, and then Cody Rhodes turns on Kenny and pushes him to the side and takes over leadership. They could have easily done that with Scott Steiner, you know, just had him almost usurp Hogan's leadership while he's away and turn the NWO back into this kind of edgy, you know, badass group. Because by the beginning of '99, when Bagwell and Steiner joined the NWO Elite, Scotty had kind of found his character by then. Yeah. He was rounding into the Big Papa Pump character that would really become one of WCW's last great original creations.
Yeah. And his character really does not change that much from that point on until WCW's final show. He's very consistent and
he was a guy. Character. Yeah, and he was a guy that like people, you know, I think when you think about like heels causing riots in the late '90s, like the Dudley Boys are kind of the example you think of from ECW, but Scott Steiner was doing that on a different level in WCW in early '99. I remember watching, I think it was Spring Stampede '99, and it was scaring me the way that he was like getting in fans' faces, almost like he was having roid rage, you know? And like, it was like, my God, I was like terrified that he was going to rip some fan's head off, you know? And people were just liquid hot for this guy. Like, it was crazy. As far as like a villain goes.
Do you have Greg, do you have a Scott Steiner impression like Big Papa Pump? Like, you some bitch.
Oh God, I can't do it on command. I don't think. I just, for some reason, I always go back to the promo when he first turned on Rick and he was talking about, you know, I was the bigger, badder, faster, stronger Steiner brother, and you know, really hard R's, but it's harder, you know, unless you want to go into the you know, the more outlandish. You know, the Earth's on a 45.5-degree axis. You know, all that stuff. You know.
Steiner. And if you lean too hard into it, you end up doing Rick Steiner, I think.
Right, exactly. No one
with
wants
the
to
voices.
Do
that. No.
I believe the catchphrase was, and this is just too long for a catchphrase, but woof, woof, I'm the DFG. You want some? Come get some. You don't like me? Bite me.
Is he like Greg? I'm not sure, but is he like legit retarded, or is he just like a really good actor or something?
Well, he's on a school board today, right?
Yes, but as someone who spent some time covering local school board meetings, that doesn't mean much.
That doesn't say much, yeah. I
don't know. It was certainly a unique time, but I've always heard that he's actually a fairly smart guy, whereas Scott kind of isn't.
Okay.
But Scott was just blessed with the entertaining gene, I guess. Yeah. Probably caused by years of chemical enhancements.
and no doubt by pushing switches on bitches. So, that's what I always go back.
It's not a hurricane, it's a Frankensteiner.
Yes, another great one.
I was scared. Like that may have been the last wrestling character that actually scared me, was Scott Steiner. Just in general, like he terrified me that he was going to. Remember when he chased J.J. Dillon?
I was about to say, where was it that he chased everybody away from the announce desk? And J.J., I mean, he just takes off. I mean, I didn't think anybody could move that fast at the age and size that he was. But
yeah, somebody said, I don't know if it was Buff. Somebody said in the shoot interview that like that was legit. That Scott was pissed. Because he had gotten suspended for some reason before, like legitimately by the company. And so JJ told the announcers, or maybe been Heenan, but JJ told the announcers, hey, let's just stay put. It'll be fine.
Right, don't go anywhere.
Don't go anywhere. And then as soon as Scott comes out, they see the look in his eyes and like, fuck that. And they all abandon ship. And then poor JJ, JJ would have been eating soup for the rest of that year if Steiner had actually gotten a hold of him. Good Lord. What a terrifying human being.
Yes. But I mean, I guess he gets a nice rub off of that little spell where he was the quote unquote leader of nWo Hollywood, because he does get the bump up to nWo Elite after that. Mm-hmm. Of course, I guess Buff was lucky enough to ride his coattails, perhaps. Buff still wasn't back wrestling yet at that point. He, I don't think he returned to the ring until maybe that spring of '99. And
yeah, I think you're right. Buff was kind of playing the cackling, sidekick to Scott Steiner at this point.
Yes, kind of the hype man. Which was a role he was really good at, I will say. But, I mean, you still have the Black and White, who are now truly relegated and referred to as the B team. Mm-hmm. And what are we down to now? So you still have the Giant, and you have Kurt Hennig. But the Giant leaves beginning of '99 for the WWF. He has a match with Kevin Nash, who hits him with a wrench to win the match. That wrench, by the way, planted by Eric Bischoff, who, this is some great trivia for you, Greg. Do you remember who Eric Bischoff was working with after his demotion from the presidency of WCW? Remember, Flair beats him. He goes back to the announce desk. He's also kind of the gopher. He's doing odd jobs. And he's setting up the ring on this particular Nitro. Do you remember who he was setting up the ring with?
Please tell me it was Klondike Bill.
It was Klondike Bill.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, so you can find that on the network. I don't remember exactly what show. It's probably a January Nitro in '99.
At what point did Disco Inferno become the nWo Elite kind of hanger-on, where he thought he was a member but he wasn't?
I mean, he'd been hanging out with Scott Hall like as early as, I would say, December, January. And he was, kind of their whipping boy. He kind of reminded me of Louis Spicolli from the year before.
Yes.
But not even held in that high of esteem.
And he actually was part of some really funny vignettes that they filmed, too, around January and February with the nWo Elite thing.
Yes. Kurt Hennig got kicked out of the group. He got his ass beat in an airport parking lot for no apparent reason.
For no reason. I know. I remember that part. I remember, like, what the hell was that all about?
They beat his ass. They make it basically look like they kill him and they're going to bury his body, because they stuff him in the back of a Ford Taurus and drive off. So for all intents and purposes, we're thinking we're never going to see Curt Hennig again. But fortunately,
so this was the official destruction of the B team, right?
Well, that's the thing. This was the trimming of the fat, I would say, because after that, you still have.
They trimmed the fat by eliminating the two best members of the team.
Yes, exactly. So you're now left with the extraordinary Stevie Ray, who eventually assumes leadership of the Black and White. You have Vincent. You have Horace Hogan. I can't even say it with a straight face.
Bryan Adams.
You have Bryan Adams, and you have Scott Norton.
Mm-hmm.
So these five are still hanging out, Black and White. And on the other side of that, you have the Elite. Bret Hart is nursing a groin pull, the likes of which you've never seen. So he's out of the picture. Conan had been booted out. So
Trivia on the groin injury, the likes of which we've never seen. According to his book, the groin injury was caused by a match with Dean Malenko.
Heard that, yeah. He was quite pissed at Malenko, too.
Yeah, he wrote in his book that he lost respect for him as a wrestler that day because he told him not to do the move, and Malenko tried to do the move and couldn't lift him up high enough or whatever. So kind of a weird deal. Not my hill to die on, but
no, yeah, exactly. But I mean, such as Bret Hart and WCW, just these kind of situations,
calamities,
right? And I mean, nothing really comes of this whole NWO Reformation thing, right?
Yeah. Biggest missed opportunity in WCW.
You figure the logical conclusion to this is Goldberg just bulldozing everybody to make his way back into title contention, get his hands on Hogan, and crush Hogan. Well, that never happens. I mean, he does get his revenge on Hall and then Nash, but he spins his wheels big time that spring, does Goldberg.
Yup. Here's the problem with this whole... I have very strong opinions on this because I am of the belief, and I know that this invites ridicule from many, and that's fine. I've had this discussion on the blog going back. It's such a beaten into the ground discussion. I, to this day, do not think the finger poke of doom is responsible for the demise of WCW in any way. Mm-hmm. I think that it was actually while from a purely story perspective, you can say it doesn't make much sense because there's no resolution to the Wolfpack storyline at all. WCW needed to do something. They needed some kind of a reboot, some kind of a fresh direction coming out of ending the streak and giving them a new direction. And I thought the NWO Elite angle was good. I thought the finger poke was good. I thought it gave Goldberg a brand new motivation to his character beyond extending the streak, a real storyline for him for the first time, maybe. Yep. And I thought it was set up perfectly because you've got this reheated asshole heel group. Goldberg is going to come in. He's going to have to go through them one by one. Bagwell, Steiner, Luger. Certainly Luger would have to be on his hit list because he racked him. Hall, Nash, and then finally Hogan, like almost like Game of Death, the Bruce Lee movie. You have to go up levels and fight a new boss at the end of each level to get to Hogan, and it should have happened, but it didn't for two primary reasons. One is Kevin Nash was booking, and two, the bigger reason, honestly, even beyond that, is WCW's panicked booking of misreading one crowd reaction and turning that into a reason to do a bizarre double turn of Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan. Do you remember this, Tim?
Ugh, yeah.
It killed the entire angle, and in the end, killed WCW.
Yep. Yeah, I cannot disagree with you. I think we had this discussion with Travis Banks as well. So Add him to the list. I will defend to my dying day that the finger poke of doom started out as actually a great angle, and the problem was entirely in the execution. People look at it and say, well, yes, it got heat, but it got the wrong kind of heat. It got the change the channel type of heat. And no, it didn't. I mean, that would come later.
The numbers don't back that up at all.
No.
Right.
I mean, eventually, yes, WCW would go to the well too many times and cry wolf and various other idioms that I'm reaching for. But this was not where that started. People look back and say, well, you could tie it back to this as the beginning of all those problems. And sure you can, but they had an opportunity to really make something of this and have a storyline that I think at the end of the day would have been hailed as kind of a renaissance for them. They needed that shot in the arm. I can tell you that watching at the time, as I was, my interest in WCW was certainly waning towards the end of 98 into early 99. When they did that finger poke match, so to speak, that reignited my interest. Like, I was into that.
Me too.
Was I happy with it as a match? Of course not. It wasn't a match. It was an angle. But I'm sure I would have been a lot angrier had I been in the Georgia Dome live witnessing that. It was the definition of a bait and switch, yes. But as somebody who's watching on free TV at home, thought it was tremendous storytelling.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you.
And I think also from we've kind of talked about it almost from the objective standpoint. From a purely subjective standpoint, I had grown so sick of babyface Kevin Nash, like pandering, repetitive promos, stuff like that. I was ready for the return of a heel edgy Nash, and I think that's one of the other issues. Is I think the NWO Elite was a chance for them to kind of drop the cool aspect of the NWO and go more for that real heel side of them, and they weren't 100% invested in doing that. But the double turn just freaking killed everything because it ruined. You had to have Hogan at the end of the storyline for it to work, and that killed it. You lost that, and it was going to be a chance to kind of tell the story they didn't tell with Goldberg in the first place, where he didn't have to go through the whole NWO. He just went right through Hogan. Now you had a chance to tell that long-form story. Then it could be the final destruction of the NWO, and then you can move on to something else. But they just accelerated everything to a ridiculous degree.
And there were problems on the periphery as well. I think Luger goes down with an injury pretty early into that run, blew out a bicep or something. So he was off the table. Of course, the double turn with Hogan. By Spring Stampede, so we're talking our fourth pay-per-view of 1999, Hogan is going into that a face. I mean, it's absurd. Hall dropped off the face of the planet like after February. I think his last match for a while was that Super Brawl,
and that was due almost entirely to his demons, if you will. Correct?
Yeah. Finally had caught up with him in a major way. So, I mean, these certainly did not help, but I still think some of those problems could have been worked around if they had just kept their eye on the ball. And
agreed,
they wouldn't do it. So
I mean, the Lex thing, you easily can plug Steiner into the Lex role, no problem.
Yep, and Buff was going to be ready to go pretty soon.
Yep.
But that, in a way, in a sense, kind of concludes our journey, our survey through the history. There is a footnote to the NWO. Of course, you did have the the Black and White still keeping the dream alive for a little while. I think they technically outlasted the nWo Elite into the waning days of 1999. But in a way, like Stevie Ray is the last surviving member of the original incarnation of the nWo. So that's something. There is the Black and Silver. Is that even worth talking about?
It potentially could have been worth talking about had Bret Hart not had a career-ending injury at the hands of William Goldberg of the York Foundation.
Yes. So who were the members of the Black and Silver? It was Bret. It was Jarrett,
Jeff Jarrett, Hall, and Nash.
Steiner.
Scott Steiner. And those were the official members, I think. And then I think once Bret went down, they added in the Harris brothers.
Oh boy.
As silver and black members. And then the nWo just kind of fizzled out, and it became like Hall and Nash went away again, and Steiner got suspended for that promo where he called Ric Flair an old bastard.
Yes.
and talked about Diamond Dallas Page's liver spots.
Yes.
And said that he told all the people at home to switch the channel to the WWF.
Oh my
because
God.
WCW sucks. So they suspended him. Imagine that. And so the nWo, in the span of like a week, all this happened in like a week. And in the span of a week, the nWo was left as Jeff Jarrett and the Harris brothers.
It was a fucking repeat of 1999. Just even at like a even more of a pale imitation of what they did in 99, with the disillusion even occurring even faster. Like, I mean, Bret's gone. His career is over. Hall and Nash, whatever is going on with them, that was the year I think Hall disappeared for his neck injury, his neck surgery. So it's the same damn shit. And it all, again, was surrounding Goldberg, who that time, that was when he punched the window out of the limo and tore his arm all to shit.
Yep.
I mean, you're right. It was like in the span of a week, 2 weeks. My God. Just
amazing. And this is also around the same period of time that I bought my one and only nWo t-shirt, because I never had one before this, and I bought a glow-in-the-dark nWo shirt from Walmart.
Was it a black and silver one?
Yep.
Oh, man. I hope you still have that.
You know, I don't know. I haven't found it in my going through my clothes here, but it's possible it's in one of my boxes of old toys and stuff. I don't know. I have to look at some point. Did I tell you guys when I was on with the Sting episode, we talked about my WCW origins? Did I tell you guys about when we moved from South Florida to Mobile, Alabama for the beginning of my 8th grade year, and I went to this school that was both a high school and a middle school. So there's a huge student body, and we pull in to like for orientation day or whatever. You know, it's before you sign up for all your classes and all that, and you know, I was real nervous and all that. And I walked to the doors, and actually I didn't have to walk to, because you could see it from the parking lot. Somebody, I don't know if it was the senior class or what, this is how popular this was at this time. This would have been summer of 98 or summer of 97. Somebody had spray painted nWo in giant letters all over the front doors of the school.
Holy shit.
I mean, that's how big this group was. This is how popular they were at the time. So pretty awesome. And also for me, it kind of helped me a little bit, because like, my God, there's wrestling fans here. What's happened?
Yeah, really. It's probably just pre-gaming for the Nitro party, I'm sure.
I think it was Stagger Lee Marshall that actually did it.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
How like WWF and WWE They always kind of spin the wrestling business as, oh, it's like cyclical. And they try to kind of say that, maybe during the downtime, oh, well, it's cyclical. It'll come back. But we've actually been 20 years on now since the last boom. And I don't think we've had another boom. And I started going back and thinking, well, Hogan was responsible basically for the boom in the 80s. And it seems like his heel turn and the nWo is responsible for the 90s boom. And it always seems like WWF seems to spin it as the Austin McMahon thing.
Mm-hmm.
WrestleMania was kind of the boom, but I think wrestling was already kind of booming at that point, right? It just they weren't booming.
100%, man. Dude, you are saying things that I've thought since that time, because people forget, like, the narrative, the retroactive narrative is wrestling was in smoky bars until Hulk Hogan caused the boom in the 80s, which we know is not true. There was lots of big stars before Hogan, but Hogan did cause, along with Vince, the boom in the 80s. Okay. And then wrestling was down again. And then Austin came along and cut the King of the Ring promo and then became the biggest star ever. And there was a new boom period. So, but that's not the case. The end, I still believe that it was a rising tide, and don't get me wrong, Stone Cold would become a star beyond anybody that WCW ever produced. But it was there was already a rising tide of wrestling fans. And this is I can just tell you anecdotally, and maybe you guys had the same experience. When I was really little, I could talk to my friends at school about wrestling, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We're talking 89, 90, 91. Kids were still watching wrestling. By 93, none of my friends watched wrestling anymore. So I was watching it, but I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And that was the case for a long time. I had one friend that I met that I could talk about contemporary wrestling with in like 94, 95, 96. And so when we moved to Mobile, I was expecting more of the same, but something had happened in the prior year, and there was just a wave of wrestling fans. Everybody was talking about the nWo and Hogan and all of that stuff. And then, of course, yes, it got beyond that in 98 where it really blew up. But I believe there's a strong argument that without the increased interest overall in the industry that was caused by Hogan and the nWo, there would not have been the groundswell of support for Stone Cold that came, because I think there were more people just watching wrestling in general in 97 than there were just 2 years prior.
Yeah, because it's kind of the same kind of thing I was thinking, because it's not even really just Hogan, right? Because Hogan became the babyface and won the title like in 84, but WrestleMania wasn't until a whole year later. It was kind of the MTV thing too. It was kind of like a perfect storm, whereas in the 90s it was like a perfect storm too, because it's not just going to be Austin is suddenly huge popular. You got to have kind of outside eyes on the product too.
Yeah, and I think that is most definitely the legacy of the New World Order. Was, if people want to say that wrestling became cool again during the Attitude Era, no, wrestling became cool thanks to the nWo. And the nWo preceded the Attitude Era. They backed Vince into a corner. I mean, that's the reality. The WWF was down, had to battle up from behind. Yes, they took advantage, and there's some back and forth at the height of the Monday Night Wars. You think of the 97s and 98 periods, but that started and that happened because of WCW and because of the nWo storyline that got so many outside eyes on wrestling again. The wrestling that they were watching, the wrestling they were interested in 1996 would have been WCW, not the WWF. That came a little bit later.
Totally. That's exactly my recollection of it at the time. People were buzzing about the nWo and buzzing about WCW, and kids were wearing Raven shirts at school. You know, the goth kids were flocking to Raven,
no
and you know, I remember Chris Jericho was extremely popular at my school, and during his heel run, and of course this coincided with Stone Cold, because what would happen is kids. Okay, more people are starting to watch Nitro. Oh, well, Raw's on at the same time, so we started watching both. Or I was already watching both, but a lot of kids would just flip back and forth as people did in those days. And then eventually it got to where WWF was more interesting, and so they would stay there longer. And you know, Stone Cold and all they deserve all the credit that they get. But without the nWo, there's no DX, there's no either version of DX. There's no Shawn DX, and there's no Hunter DX. There's no Mr. McMahon, probably, because I think Bischoff in some ways did set the template for that.
Yeah.
I think there's no there aren't the eyes that can get on the product to see Stone Cold and The Rock and these guys that would become the biggest stars of the generation. You know, so yeah, for all of the negative stuff that's been written and said about the nWo, and a lot of it is true, a lot of it's deserved, but I think that maybe outside of the members themselves, who are known to pat themselves on the back, I don't know that there is enough written and said about the positive impact that the nWo had on the entire wrestling business, including WWE.
Yeah, and I can even sit here and defend like how bloated the faction got, where that's one of the criticisms that people to this day will make, right? Is that, yeah, it started out as this very prestigious stable with the kind of tippy top cream of the crop guys, but then you added Buff Bagwell, you added Brian Adams, you added Vincent, and I don't know, my argument to that is you needed cannon fodder if this was going to be this empire, essentially, that is going up against the establishment. And I don't know, I think maybe I'm of the school of it's better to give guys a rub off of a really, really over angle and faction than it is to just put all your top guys together and let that drive the faction.
And it also, I think it also made sense that as this group, from almost a symbiotic thing, where over a certain period of time, 3 or 4 or 5 guys weren't going to be able to hold off the entire WCW roster, so they would need to expand. Likewise, it would make sense that as guys are getting their asses kicked every week and they're looking around and they're seeing the lay of the land, that people were going to want to start attaching themselves to that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you know, I think there's an argument to be made. I mean, yeah, there was bloat for sure, but I think if we were pushed against a wall, I think we could make defenses of it in that way, because, yeah, I think you did need to have cannon fodder. And, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of times the cannon fodder members of the nWo were the most entertaining.
Yeah, no doubt. And got nice little bumps off of that into, you know, characters. Look at I mean, we talked about Bagwell, of course. Hell, Kurt Hennig coming out of the nWo. I mean, Kurt Hennig is Kurt Hennig, but look what that led to, the whole West Texas Rednecks.
Yep.
We didn't, you know, we could have talked about that as an offshoot of the nWo, which it is in a lot of ways. But, you know, even setting all that aside, look at the charismatic personalities that you've got at the core of this thing. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. Then later on you add Randy Savage. You know, it doesn't get much bigger than that, just in terms of charisma and personality. I mean, to this day, I will watch those long droning promos that we've talked about, where it's all these guys in the ring and It's the same shit week after week, and I'll still sit there and watch it. The Triple H Evolution monologues, these are not. So
exactly.
Well, I don't know if that's nostalgia or what, but it still is entertaining as hell to me.
A thought just crossed my mind. One of the major complaints about the NWO era is that the matches from the NWO sucked. The main event matches sucked. And that's true for the most part. The outsiders weren't putting on clinics exactly, and Hogan's matches were back rake heavy, shall we say?
Yes.
Do you feel, either of you, that the NWO should have added as a top tier member, not as a cannon fodder member, a quote unquote workhorse guy to the group, the way that maybe Chris Benoit was to the Horsemen at the time? Someone that was maybe a really good worker that could go out and have great main events that might have benefited from the NWO, or would it have been a bad fit for what they were doing?
I was just thinking something like that too, and I don't know if you're alluding to this, but like going back to all this '98 stuff, because like Thunder's on the network, and I was really kind of going through some of that because I didn't remember a lot of it. Jericho would have been perfect for like NWO Hollywood when they broke off. Instead of adding like Bryan Adams or even the Disciple, you had like Jericho in there. He had that kind of like attitude that would have been perfect.
I was thinking Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, nice.
Like the sleazy. Jericho could work too. But I'm just such a Jericho mark that I would have hated to change anything about his goofy character, But certainly he was over enough to get that position. But I think like that sleazy, like late '97, early '98 Eddie Guerrero character would have fit in actually perfectly in the NWO as this guy that kind of slides in and is bumping shoulders. Suddenly he's bumping shoulders with, Nash, Hall, and Hogan. But he's going out there, and instead of wrestling Chavo, for instance, he's going out there and he's wrestling, babyface Randy Savage, or and not just wrestling them on Nitro, but wrestling them in prominent matches. So you'd have a chance. I don't know. That's just a thought. Like, would that have even worked for what the NWO's gimmick was? I don't know.
I want to say that Jericho has talked about in maybe his first book that the door was open to him joining the NWO. Like they wanted him in, and he was kind of like, nah, I want to be able to do my own thing, because he was like pretty much booking the cruiserweight division himself.
Right.
And that's what helped him get so over. But I certainly could see that type of character fitting in, especially with NWO Hollywood. I think Eddie Guerrero is a great pick as well. And you think about Eddie, especially at that time, he was not a great promo, but was a great worker. So what he kind of lacked in promo skills, you could disguise by putting him in there with a bunch of dudes who were all talkers, and he could be, as you say, the work rate guy. That I could have seen working.
And especially if you were doing the gimmick of Hogan doesn't want to get his hands dirty, So, which he was doing a lot at that time. So you could easily have had Eddie come in and worked a lot of high profile angles, and probably had, he had a lot of heat at that time too. Eddie did.
Oh, yeah.
I think you could have carried that through within the NWO Hollywood dynamic, and maybe had, Eddie and Nash. Eddie probably could have gotten a better match out of Kevin Nash than a lot of the guys that Nash was wrestling that year.
So. Certainly. Yep. So I guess you could look at Six as kind of a worker type dude, but the thing is, he never seemed like he had many matches, even when he was around.
Yeah, and he felt like he was injured so long.
Yeah. Maybe that was the intent, and it just never really panned out.
I always forget that he was even in there, and then I'll come across him on a show, and I'll be like, "Holy shit, he was in the NWO."
Yeah, with his finishing move, the Buzz Killer, which was the cross-face chicken wing.
That's right.
Which I always thought was a better finish than the X Factor, though. But that's just me.
Yeah, kind of in a way. I think you should have used both. You know why? Why limit yourself?
Why limit yourself? And the answer to that is because it was the Attitude Era, and everybody limited themselves.
Right. Well, fellas, I think we've done a nice job here. I've had a lot of fun.
This has been fun. This has been fun. A walk down the New World Order avenue, the biggest icon in wrestling.
Oh,
New World Order.
There we go.
Avenue.
Oh. Well, Mr. Savage, would you like to wrap us up? Don't wrap me up! Wrap us up.
Thank you, Greg. It's been awesome having you come back on the show.
Oh, man, my pleasure. I enjoy talking old WCW anytime I get the chance. I just appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to flap my gums and maybe leave you with one more hello, here's Alex Wright.
You know, I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of holding out for a Conan K-Dog promo.
All right, let me see here. I think I can still muster this one up. You know the black and the white, they be trrrbate for life. With the Wolfpack, somos unos pacos locos forever.
Oh, man, that was good.
I'm ready to peel some potatoes.
Yo, Kevin Nash, why don't you toss my salad and peel my potatoes? This was pre-Urban Dictionary, too. A lot of speculation at school the next day on that.
Man, what could he be talking about? Gregorian X. Phillipsian, where can people find you online if you would like to be found online?
Oh, well, if people would like to find me online, they can find me on the Twitter at gphillips8652. That is GPHILLIPS 8652. They can join Place to Be Nation Comics on Facebook. I am one half of the Hard Traveling Fanboys, which you can catch every single week at Place to Be Nation Pop. Subscribe. We got a bunch of great podcasts on Place to Be Nation Pop, and there's also us. So we talk about comics, and you can join the comics page on Facebook.
Awesome. I am a member of Place to Be Nation Pop as well. You can find me on the Place to Be Nation Pop comics page on Facebook. Check out my monthly podcast on that feed, Talkin' Pop. Myself and Jenny Smith, talking about basically whatever we want to with friends. It's a lot of fun. We entertain ourselves, certainly. Hope that listeners are entertained along the way as well. So do check that out if you are so inclined. All right, we got to get out of here. What kind of programming can folks look forward to next on the Superstation?
We are desperately out of time because coming up next on Superstation, it is RoboCop 2 starring Peter Weller and Tom Noonan.
Awesome. Forward to that. Edits and all. But ladies and gentlemen, we got to go!